Incremental ratings. That is the 10th section of the Pleasurable Guide to SuperMemo and is the introduction to priorities. Then, the contents is quite a lot. It's one of the largest sections of the Fluency cycle, and that's because priorities are a big deal. Most of the time is invested in soft skills, in developing the awareness and the skill set rather than the hard skills. That is, you have this feature here, there, that's the menu, that's how you do it. We will cover this in, I don't know, less than 20 minutes overall. Then, we will introduce the priorities, what it means, why it's your job, not SuperMemo's, why the highest priority is 0, not 100, the difference in the priority position and percentile, and then we will cover through an analogy. Then, the absolute and relative expressions of priority, how it's represented in SuperMemo, some concrete examples, such easier to understand. What should you use, the position or the percentile? Is not that easy answer, but at the beginning, we will start with the percentile. Then, increase and decrease in priorities, introducing the priority dialog. One of the ways to change the priority, but there are many. How to set a precise priority, understanding the color coding. You will see that the color of the priority tells you already the range. What's called the priority protection, we will see that. There's a slight difference between SuperMemo 18 and 19, so there's a slight specific detail about this. What happens if you have a low priority protection, or you have a large drop in the priority protection, not necessarily low, but a massive drop? Or what happens if you have chronically low priority protection? What is the golden rule of prioritizing? Then the priority bias, even if for now we only create the awareness, and hey, I'm telling you the solution, you won't succeed. No human will succeed at the first try. You need iteration. The course will just mitigate this at the minimum, basically. Then, why prioritizing is difficult until it becomes easy. Also, we have an analogy, the priority scale. Then, one of the rule of thumbs, that is forget one test, mental workout. If it's really hard to say what's more important than the other because they are too different, I cannot compare those. How low can you go with priorities? Then the stats, using the stats to your advantage. How to nudge your priorities. Then some of the mindset that this is in the long run, can be stressful. You need to cultivate the sense of priority, which takes time. You need to be honest, or you will pay the price. And then some of the operations. Then introducing priority zones. This is not official. It's just me and some people in the community. It's just to make it simple. Then how you can progress on those zones. And then finally, some of the operations that you can increase in bulk, decrease, spread, adjust. We will see the difference on those operations. What happens if you neglect priorities? When it's valid to neglect priorities, there's some user case which is valid to do so. What is the long-term consequences of any of the batch operations we mentioned? What they call the priority clumping, how to solve it or minimize it, and a summary of the batch priority operations. It's quite a lot. But believe me, this has been refined after many years of iterations and hundreds of hours of tutoring. And this is just the core. In less than 4 hours, you get a massive value with priorities. So with no further ado, let's start with the section. So it's time to finally introduce the priorities in SuperMemo. So we're going to have a dedicated section just for priorities, but we're only going to see how to set it in an element, a few other things, and the same in bulk, and that's about it. Most of what we'll see are in the soft side, the opposite of the hard skill, the soft skill. When you change a priority, what are the effects and so on? It's massive. So now in this video, we are just going to introduce what it is. Here I have the definition, the official glossary, which, I mean, is not the best example. But let's start. A priority, by the way, it's a what? From an element is a property. Remember something we have seen already? The element property window. No, not window. Dialog, among other things, we have the priority. Awesome. We can also see it here, in some other places. So, priority of an element is a number that reflects the importance of an element, that element, in SuperMemo. That's it. That's the end of the definition. Everything else is already some examples, or the implementation in the toolkit, and so on. This will be on the priority queue. We have introduced the priority queue, even though we haven't officially introduced priorities. We will see later on about the 0%, how you can modify it, and so on. What I will say, just because in the Fluency we don't cover tasks, we just presented them, just to let you know they exist, and so on. Just to let you know that tasks, they also have priority based on the value time. So they have a priority as a task in a task list, and a priority as an element in the priority queue, which is not the same thing. They are coexisting at the same time. And if you do the mastery, we will cover that much later in a dedicated section. Then, why priorities are there? To manage the information overflow. There's too much information. We cannot get through that. So we want certain order and do whatever we want. That's a massive thing in incremental reading, and surprisingly, it was not from the beginning. Here I have a screenshot, which is specifically not public, from Piotr Wozniak, and just is to make my point that you know, or as a reminder, that incremental reading was out in the year 2000. That's in a screenshot, and you'll see repetitions in the year 2002 and 2003 and 4 and 5, and the priority is empty. There's no such value on those repetitions, right? This is a screenshot that we'll see later on, is a repetition history of one item. But I use it to make a relevant point, is that before, until 2006, SuperMemo 2006, which later on changed the name to SuperMemo 13, had no priorities. And it was a massive deal. That's why some other features that today are outdated, obsolete, obscure, arcane, like the pending queue or changing the A factor for getting index or stuff like that, especially for topics, there's no need for that. What we're going to use instead now are the priorities. Much easier. Easy to say, but priorities will be the thing that it will take you the most time to master. Or not to master, but to do it fluently enough that you achieve what you want to achieve. That's why we will cover so many videos about the soft skills. It's a really big deal. So, before we dig further with priorities, you should know that SuperMemo doesn't know what is important for you. That's actually your job. It's easy to say, but there's more nuisance for that. That's why it requires a video. So you know that SuperMemo is a powerful but neutral algorithm for memory. Neutral for content, could be anything, right? SuperMemo doesn't understand context, relevance, or value of that information. It just contains the information and stores this information and schedules that information for you. But SuperMemo doesn't know any difference of that content. Only the size, so the character as in character count, and stuff like this, and that's about it. The content is not being analyzed. So the effectiveness of the software depends entirely on your judgment. Hey, this is important, this is not important, this is more important than this other thing, and so on. Depends 100% on you. So you have a role of a gatekeeper, a knowledge gatekeeper. You're responsible as a user for selecting what is worth learning. Only you can know that. You must filter out irrelevant details and low-quality information. That doesn't mean just sources. Within the source, you have to filter out the crap and the noise and the low-quality stuff. So the core task is evaluate all knowledge before it enters SuperMemo or at the time. Because, okay, is this worth importing? You'll make this decision, right? Once you import it, then within this source, let's simplify it to an article, not the entire article is useful for you, right? Okay, so you will do iterations of that. But what's the danger? Without careful selection, you risk memorizing unimportant garbage, wasting time and effort. Meaning that what you learn is actually factual, is true, is not memorizing hallucinations of AI, let's say, but it's irrelevant, it's useless. You're not going to apply that, right? That, yeah, I can write an article about who won the Nobel Prize this year in physics or whatever, and I could memorize the name of his dog, the pets he had, stuff like this. Okay. And could be a very good quality flashcard, very well formulated, but what is the purpose of this? I'm memorizing garbage, right? Okay. Second rule, you are an architect of understanding. SuperMemo doesn't teach you anything. You teach yourself. So SuperMemo only schedules reviews for things you already understand. Or you are getting there. In incremental reading, as sometimes it's more iterative. But we're not going to discuss the details here. Then what's the core task of the second rule? Break down complex topics into smaller, simpler, and clear flashcards. This is not one step. You will distill this, extract, rephrase, perhaps extract again, do glossation, rephrase as question and answer, perhaps multiple times, and so on. So this process of formulating knowledge is a vital part of the learning process. And if an item, a flashcard, is hard to remember, it's your job to rephrase it and simplify it, not the software's. SuperMemos. So now you can get help with AI, let's say. But it's still you as a user. Hey, prompt AI to reward this. You have a third rule, and it's the prioritizer of goals. You must tell SuperMemo what is more important to you. SuperMemo doesn't know that. How you do that? For instance, with priorities and concepts. I have concepts of, science, health. Hey, I do care about health. How do I tell that to SuperMemo? I create a concept called health with a default priority very high, and most of the elements there, they have a very high priority. So the core task is to use the priority queue to align your learning with your personal goals. And it's not as easy and discrete. Health, then science. Some other apps do that. In SuperMemo, you fine-tune this to the grain detail of element. Every single element have a unique priority. And this priority can change. So it's not a dead sentence. Then priorities determine which items, or any elements by the way, are reviewed first, usually, not necessarily, as we will see, and which might be delayed if you're short on time. So that, hey, I cannot review all of the items that are outstanding, waiting for review today, and it will be pushed, waiting for me tomorrow, and next day, and next day. So without your input, without the user input, SuperMemo treats everything as equally important. And that is a key factor. If you use an space repetition app, like Anki, you are here. And with Anki, you cannot tell what is more important than others. Yeah, you can have some heuristic approach with decks. So you have high priority deck, medium priority deck, and so on. But it's not the same thing. The algorithm is treating this with the same importance. Not in SuperMemo. And it's your job to keep that on check. Then you have a division of labor. What's your job and what's SuperMemo's job? SuperMemo job is about the when, automating the timing, when you should review this next. Because you are reading, you want to interleave this, or because you want to memorize it. You want to keep it in your long-term memory. So you will calculate the optimal schedule for long-term memory. That's SuperMemo responsibility. It's what you pay for, basically. And what you rely on SuperMemo, because if you want to do it yourself, it will be inefficient and extremely time-consuming, a full-time job. What's actually your job? The what and why. What information you want to process and run from, why that information is important and how much it's important, and how to formulate it for effective memorization. So conclusion. Success with SuperMemo is a partnership where you provide the wisdom and the tool provides the schedule. That's why sometimes people give up SuperMemo that, hey, it doesn't work. It's not that they don't say that, hey, it's not for me. Some people say that, and it's a different thought pattern. It's because they have failed that section. They failed, more or less, their 3 roles. Gatekeeper of knowledge, the architect of understanding, or prioritizer of goals. One of those 3, 2, or both, or all of them at worst case scenario, then SuperMemo won't work because you will have the same experience as using Anki. That every single flashcard has the same importance and is treated exactly the same. So no worries, in this course we're going to see a massive deal priorities, especially in this case, in this section, but transcends priorities. You always need to use your own judgment, and you outsource the scheduling to SuperMemo because that's its job. Don't let SuperMemo prioritize that. If you neglect priorities, SuperMemo will decide priorities for you, and it's absolutely arbitrary. And there will be consequences long term, so don't do it. You will get all of the skills required in this course, and in case you still struggle, you can always get tutoring. Now it's time to introduce, or let's say to clarify, why the priority works the other way around. What do I mean by that? So take a guess. This article, this topic has a priorities of 98.51. It's close to 100. Is this the maximum, close to the maximum, or close to the minimum? Is this very high or very low priority? You may think that the closer to 100, the better, the higher. Actually, it's the opposite. This is a very low priority. The highest priority in SuperMemo is 0%, which I think is my root element. Yeah, exactly, here you go. That is the highest. Well, it's the second element in this case. It's the second most important element in this collection. So a low position and a low percentage, depends on how you express it, is high priority. This seems counterintuitive, right? Yeah, but it's done on purpose for the choice. Let's understand why. What happens is that as we will see later on, when you do incremental reading, the day-to-day basis, you will focus on the highest priority range. And as you go through all of this, and you can afford going to lower priorities, unless you keep adding more stuff that has a higher priority, and it's a never-ending story. Therefore, since you're more likely to set high priorities of what you're working with, or want to work with very soon, it's a lot easier if you put 0 or 1 than something close to 100. So, the reason behind that is that typing a number, like 2, is faster than typing 98, 99, 100, 99.5 or whatever, right? The opposite, the commutative, let's say. So this choice saves substantial amount of time over and over You accumulate. So after a year, imagine you will realize that setting or resetting priorities is part of the repetition. So you will do this a lot of times every single day. So if you cut like this, you cut this in half, let's say. By the end of the year, you're cutting quite a lot of time, more than you might realize, with just this single upside down. Then, there are two models. Let me start with the second one, is the ergonomic motivation. It's just by typing efficiency. Since SuperMemo is built to anticipate users to always focus on high priorities, it will be more frequent than low priorities. Yeah, at the time that I have a low priority, I will need to type more, right? 99.9 or 85.6. Oh yeah, but it's very less likely. Ergonomic motivation. And then we have the conceptual model. Think as a queue in a park, or it's like a rank. The position 0 is the front of the line, meaning it's the highest priority. Imagine people, that is very sad, but it's a thing, when a new iPhone, or at least the very few first iPhones, when they were released, people were waiting in queue, even the prior day, during all of night and so on. They wanted to be first, or very high in the priority. So take this as a rank. What is the highest priority? The first in the queue. The first guy will have an iPhone. And eventually it will run out of existence, and some people on the queue will get no iPhone, at least that day. It's a simple analogy. So conceptually, you can think of this as rank, and the rank, the higher the number, the worse. Oh yeah, you are the 2,600 person to get this high score in a video game. Oh yeah, you're not special, right? Many people beat you already. What if the same thing? Okay. And another perspective is that, I hope you already guessed that, is that SuperMemo, it's always built in the mind of the pro user, the power user. Unlike the more modern software that they prioritize the onboarding, the noobs, and all of this. No. Power user. That's why priorities are so hard to get at first, because there's no graduality to get familiar with. No, you have the hardcore stuff since day one, with percentage and all of this. But it's a trade-off, because it's long-term efficiency over initial intuitiveness. Yeah, it will be intuitive to use, like RemNode. Oh yeah, you have a different, not a queue, you have a different buckets, right? Or categories. Like working now, can't wait, archive. I don't know exact now the words because different software use the same thing, but they use different labels. But more or less it's this philosophy, right? That's not a priority queue at all. Then the system rewards dedicated experienced users. So once you fully master, you fully get it, you have a degree of precision that is a superpower that you cannot do in any other software. But it takes a while to get there. And over thousands of items and years of learning, so not overnight, this small design choice results in significant time saved, as we have seen before. I didn't measure that, but yeah, we could simplify that instead of 3, you put 1 or 2. To simplify half of the keys, you save half of the time. So it's like rearranging your most used tools within immediate reach. It might look messy to a visitor, but for a craftsman, it's a peak efficiency. And that's it. There's no more big of a deal about this. Hey, it's the other way around. Now if I had the choice, if I create my own software, I will keep it like this. To be honest. Makes sense. So remember, if it for you is really hard at the beginning, it works the other way around. Have the analogy of the rank. The highest rank is always the number 1, the first in command. So now it's time to cover the difference of priority expressed as position and as a percentage, or as a percentile, the percentage you see. Here we see 0 and 2. What is that? If we go to the element parameter window, it says 0.00, and the position, hey, where's the position? It's not this one. That's the ordinal we have seen already. In this, I don't know why, it's only with percentage. But if we see it in here, at the bottom, at the learned toolbar, says 0% and 2. It's the position number 2, the second element in this collection, and I can change it. But do you see, hey, I'm going to introduce this menu in upcoming videos. But just to let you know that, hey, it's not 0, 0. It's just that here I have more precision, right? So we're already seeing something. That, hey, the percentage, it is some precision. The higher the collection, the more precision you will need. This will take some limitation. But the question for now is, what do I use? The position or the percentage? Now in my case, each position, it represents this, 0.0017% of the collection queue. Okay. So let's start. I will follow now one analogy. I will follow one analogy to explain it, and we'll see the key differences. Okay. So imagine you're in a race, usually a marathon, right? New York Marathon, Boston Marathon, whatever resonates more with you, and so on. Or the Olympic Games. Let's imagine you have a huge pool of athletes, 50,000, something crazy, right? Okay. Then you could say that your priority is 35%. What does that mean? It's your personal goal that you set for yourself. You say, coach, I want to run a race in 3 hours and 30 minutes. And this equals, more or less, your importance, right? Reflects your assessment. In this case, a lower number, it's better. So it's analogous with the priority. The closer to 0, the higher the priority. So the lower the time, the better the performance, right? Cool. So that means you want to be more or less at 1/3. Then what about if you say the position? You say the exact rank. So the first, usually someone from Kenya, it's very likely will come across the first in the finishing line. He will be the first. The only difference is that there's no position 0. Starts with 1. The only difference. Then the second, the third, and people will just take more time to get through the finishing line. But this person could be you with 3 hours and a half when I will use the third person. So when this guy crosses the finishing line in 3 hours and a half, it will be in this position, 3,210, just one random choice. Because one is the objective I have, the other is what I do, right? Hey, I perform better than expected, or also depends on what other people do. I could be, I'm making this absolutely up. I'm making this in New York, and there's a lot more of amateurs. So I will perform better. No, I will have the same time, 3 hours and a half. It's just that relatively speaking, compared to others, I am in a different percentile. So even if my time is the same, then my position in the rank changes. That is a key in priorities. How value I have for this by itself, and then compared to other stuff in my collection. It's not the same thing. It's a huge deal. A very huge deal. Let's keep going. So this, the position, actually, let me do it for the sake of the example. So, my God, you can tell I almost never use the position, right? My mistake. 5,110. In this case, in my collection, equals to 9%. Because I have more than 50,000. Okay. So, my goal was 35. And now I'm in a 9%. I overperform quite dramatically, right? Awesome. So then, we could say that the goal has been achieved, and beyond that, out of the 50,000, you're at 5,210. If it was 5,000, it will be super easy. It will be in the number 10. So it's a simple ordinal number. Absolute ordinal number. I said New York. Perhaps Boston had 10,000 people. Hey, I finished 5,210. Yes, but out of 10,000. So you are in the more than 50% already, not the 9%. A big difference. That's why the percentile, it's a big change. This is a relative standing. It tells you you are in the top 10%, 9 or 11. I'm not going to do the precise math. It's a normalized score that is easy to interpret regardless of the total number of runners. That whatever the people there are, you are in the top 10. Sorry, the top 10%. Yeah, that's it. Then, the priority, the user input, right? Remember, at the beginning I said, hey, I wanted 35. Let's actually do that. That's what I wanted, to have 35%. So I was actually aiming at the position 20,000, but I finished at the position 10,200. A lot better. So this value you control directly. To the highest, remember, it reflects the importance, and the highest is 0, and the lowest is 100. It's a subjective score. A raw score of the element, in this case it's just a topic, and the value, the importance, to you. If this was imported from a website, let's say Wikipedia, it's the exact same thing. A different user will have set a different priority. What's the purpose? To provide the input for all of the other priority calculations. If I set the priority of this element, and this element alone, it's useless. It's useful when I provide the priority of everything I do, everything I import, everything I read, everything that is not done yet. As long as I keep doing this systematically, makes sense to have priorities that, hey, this is more important than this other stuff. As easy as that. So the analogy is a personal race time goal. Time goal, not the time you actually do on the race, is a big difference. Then you have the priority position, the absolute rank. What is it? Is it unique, cannot be repeated. Only one person, one athlete will finish first in the finishing line. Even if they are just a few milliseconds on the position in the marathon, but can be very precise. Like, hey, no, this is 0.00017, not 000, right? Okay. So it's the absolute rank among n, and the n is the total number of your elements in the collection. Like the total number of what? Of athletes that have finished, has crossed the finishing line. What's the purpose? It's a direct result of the priority sort. It's used internally by SuperMemo for ordering. Like, hey, who is the best athlete to the worst athlete? You have the list. But there's a limitation. Its meaning is highly dependent on the size of your collection. If I say here, 279 doesn't tell me much. If you set a new collection, that's the 229, perhaps, is the second last element in your priority queue, because you only have 280. So the actual number requires context. So being the position 500, being the position 500, for instance, is fantastic in a collection of 100,000, but it's worse in one of 500, because it will be the dead last. And the analogy is the exact starting position. My mistake, finishing. That, hey, my goal was in the 20,000, but I just got 5,000. I perform a lot better. No, it's that people were less trained. Selection bias in that course. So now let's imagine that my collection is 20,000 elements. I have changed the number so you can not use. So we move on from the analogy. So I put a priority of 3%. Well, my collection is not the same, but so it's more visual. Let me do the 3%, right? Okay. That's the element A. Then the position SuperMemo into 20,000 finds that this position is in the 150 element in the list. It's just math. You do 150 divided by 20,000, that's it, and then you multiply by 100 if you want the percentage. And then SuperMemo will round. We'll make some, do you see now I only have one percentage? I don't have decimal points here. Same here. Oh, it's 0.75. It will show 1%. It rounds up. And let's use another element. So imagine it's some other element that we visited before, like here. I'll wait. No, that's 50%. And in this example will be 9,400. You do the math, and it's dead on 47. It will be 47.000. Easy, right? So this is how you transform the rank, the position in the race, to the percentile among everyone who has finished the race or the elements in your collection, including the dismissed, pending, and so on. The question is, which one should I care about? Actually, we'll take this in a different video on its own. For now, you should pay attention to the percentile. Get that for now. So what are the key differences? The position is the absolute assigned importance. The percentile is the relative standing within the data set. If the data set is very biased, that everyone is very pro, lower position, not necessarily it's low importance. And if you go to a different race, that everything is an amateur, a high value doesn't necessarily say it's high importance. Depends on where you're at. What's the nature? Ordinal rank, first, second, and so on. And the percentile is a statistic measure. Determination. You do priority positions assigned based on predefined rules. And the percentile, calculated based on data distribution. The idea, I think, heuristically, everything that for me is low is 60% or lower. Then, context. The priority position is independent of other items. Well, at some degree, if strictly speaking, if you want this to be the item 5,000 and something, you require a collection with 5,000 and something elements, right? For instance, in this collection, I cannot put the position 1,235,000. I cannot do this because I don't have enough elements here, if this makes sense. And the percentile, the context is dependent. So the core question, what is the item's rank in the queue? Or where does this item stand in relation to the group? Are two different ways to compute, to assess, or to set priorities. Which one you will choose? Most of the time, if you're fluent, the percentile. Until you are not very pro, you have a very rich collection, you're not going to take a look at the position. That is, by the way, something we'll see later on, but just to make my point. There is some element here that is a priority protection, something we'll see later, that in SuperMemo 19, it's in position. And before, SuperMemo 18 and older, they have the percentile. What cannot be customized, by the way. Why it is changed? Precisely for that. We're going to see how you can change the priority by increments. So we know that this element, my root element, is 0% or the number 3. So I can change the priority. I don't know, I want to be precisely this one or this other one. Or I can say, at the priority you are at already, change by 0.1%. So we're using the relative priority, the percentage. So in this case, it's Ctrl-Shift up. Doesn't do anything. Why? I need to press escape. I need to make the element window active. Now if I do it again, do you see now it's number 1? Doesn't do anything else. Why? Because it's the highest priority already. Now if I go lower, it's the same, but with lower, with arrow down. So Ctrl-Shift arrow down, it's 0.1%. In my case, in my collection, a 0.1% of the priority queue is 55 positions. If your collection is smaller, perhaps it will be 5. If it's larger, it could be, I don't know, 200, whatever. You're going this always the same, by 1. So if I press 10 times, I will have modified by 1%. Then this makes sense that if it was something like, I don't know, 44, I just want a very mild change. So instead of the dialog and setting 44, I say burp 42.9. It's quicker. You can also keep pressing it and keeps lowering the position. But use the common sense, the rule of thumb. If it's a drastic change, you will be most likely to use the dialog and change it back to 44 instead of just keeping Ctrl-Shift up and down. So this is a priority increase in the element that is rendered in the element window. You're not affecting any other element. Yes, you are. How is that possible? Remember, when you change priorities, you change a priority in the queue. You're not going to push, imagine a queue of people waiting online. You're just rearranging people. You're not pushing someone out of the queue, right? That was a number third. That was the third element, so the third person in the queue. Now it's the 25,000 and so on. That means that whoever was fourth now is third. Who was fifth now is fourth, and so on. So actually we have modified more than 25,000 elements that has shifted the position by 1 in the queue. Remember this detail. So we changed the priority of one element, but as a consequence, we have moved 1 position in the queue between the range of the priority it had before and the priority it has now. Or the other way around, if it was higher and we lower it, we decrease it. Remember, Ctrl-Shift up, Ctrl-Shift down. And it can be, cancelled. That, oh shoot, I don't want to do that. If you do it up, you do down, and you are more or less in the same position. Let's look at that. 25,207. Up, down, in the same place exactly. Now it's time to introduce a new dialog in SuperMemo, and it's the element priority dialog. You need to press Alt-P, and if it doesn't work, it's because you need to have the element window active. Remember this detail. So we have some stuff here. The position, the priority expressed in the position in the queue or in percentage. This is the same value as this one. If I change this here, let's say it's 20,000 to make it round, do you see I'm actually modifying the next one? And if I modify here to be round, I modify the one in the position. I can also do it here by 1, if you want precision. And in the percentage, you can use up to 4 decimals in this dialog, which is the highest, by the way. Then we also have the interval, forgetting index, the factor we will see later on, and the ordinal that we have seen already, and we know that we can neglect that. There's other stuff here, the slider, that we will see later on. Just to let you know that it's non-linear. It grows asymptotically, but we will see later on in the next video. And here we have the 3 elements. At the center, you always have the current one. In this case, it's the concept, pleasurable learning. If now I go to some other place, like outline of psychology, it's always the same color. It's yellow. So it was not yellow because it was a concept. It's just the current always is yellow. And you have the neighbor in the priority queue. So you have this position 8,363. So the 62 is this guy, this item, and 65 is this topic, social constructivism and so on. Why SuperMemo is showing this to you? So you can assess, hey, is this the right priority? Is the outline of psychology more important than social constructivism? Yes? It's fine. No. then I need to change the priority, right? And every time you do it, it changes. So if I say 10,000 now, do you see what does study suggest? Overview of the Ptolemy world map, da da da. What I can also do is, what is this? I don't even remember that. In the arrow, you can click. And then I see, oh, okay, so it's not because I care about this place in China specifically, it was about the visualization of graphics. Okay, now it makes more sense, right? Then it's what do I care more? Visualization of graphics or the element of psychology? And this will help me to set the priority. Usually, I don't use that much. I only do it when it's very, very high priority range. Because sometimes I even know the elements, especially when there are concepts, topics I'm actively using, reading with many repetitions. Eventually, if it's too low, yeah, it's anecdotal, so I don't use it much. So feel free to use it because you will have a small collection. It will be useful, but as your collection grows, this will be more diluted and diluted and diluted until the point that it's just okay, good to know, but whatever. One final detail is that when we visit some other element, do you see now I cannot click OK? Why? Because the element window contains a different element. I cannot change now the priority of the element of psychology because I am in the visualization of graphics. So what I need to do is click again to current, and now I'm able to click OK. Easy. And yes, you can change the priority of pending and dismissed elements. It's not something exclusive to memorized. Here we're going to see how you set priorities on the precise number, or if you really want, the position in the queue. So we have seen the relative increase. So we already have seen the relative decrease and increase. But if I really know, no, this deserves 20%, I will open the dialog, the element priority dialog, and do you see already goes to the percentage? Because it's expected the user to use the percentage, not the position. Okay, and then I just put 20, I confirm by enter or by clicking OK. As easy as that. 20%. Now this is how we set priorities. We have seen half of the hard skills of priorities. Increase it, decrease it, set it like this. This can also be on the element parameter windows, by the way. Remember, Ctrl+Shift+P. I can set it here, but I don't have the slider and like this, but this is still possible, 10%. Here you go, 10%. It's an indirect way to change it as well. The only thing left is how to do it in bulk, in many elements at the same time, which is slightly more complex. Because remember, not all elements can have the same priority. That's why I want to emphasize that, hey, it's a big deal. The hard skills are laughable, it's very easy to understand, but the soft aspect, the soft skills of prioritization is a big deal. I will repeat this a few more times during the course. So that is how you set priorities. I recommend LP is dedicated to this flow, even though you can use Ctrl+Shift+P indirectly. Why you could do it like this? If you do it, I don't know, because you have wanted to do something else, like to change the template, like to change the concept that we'll see later. Okay, since I'm already here, or some comment, it's okay, since I'm already here, I will change the priority already here, in the same. Sometimes I do it, but it's, it's just convenience at the end of the day. So this is how you set priorities. Easy, right? We have introduced priorities already, and the element priority dialog. So now we are going to focus on something very relevant here, and is the color coding. So can you take a guess what's higher priority and what's lowest? The most to the left, the highest it is. Do you see now it's 0 and position 1, and here is 100. Awesome. So it's using color coding that the hottest, from the hot colors to the cold colors. So you start with the pure red, turning orange, yellow, some shade of green kind of sky blue, and blue, bam, more or less. That's why in the element window here at the bottom, we can say, hey, it's 3.9, but also because of the color. If now I change the priority to something very low, hey, it's this color. By this color, more or less, I know the range of that priority. And if it's very high, oh, it's red, or it's a sheet of red, it's very high. Awesome. Then here you have 100 positions. And does this looks familiar? It's the same thing as we have seen before on the sorting criteria. You remember that we click on the side, this moved 10 positions? Is the exact same thing. If I click, it moves 10 positions. And you have up to 100. But wait a second, there's something interesting here. This is not linear. You see it's 100%, and 0, it's 0. But if I do 10, hey, it's about 1. It's about 4, 9, 19, 16, 25. Look at the slider. The slider is already halfway, but the priority queue is only 25%. It's because you have more degree of precision in the higher ranges of priority. It's because you have more precision on the highest priority ranges. And as you go lower in the queue, you have less and less precision. Just to make my point, if we go at the end of the queue, if I just move one position, it's 98. So the last position contains 2% of the collection. And if I have the opposite, from the highest to the second highest, I just move 1, it's 0.01. It's a lot more precise. Every time the jump will be higher. Do you see? Now it's 0.03, 0.05, 0.07 more or less, and it is increasing. Here more or less it's 1, here it's 0.2 already, the jump. Until the very end that it jumps 2% altogether. It's done on purpose. It makes sense. Where you want more granularity is on the high priorities. If it's low, I don't care if it's 96.4 or 98. It doesn't make much difference. I'm not going to see this either, right? I don't need to waste my time assessing priorities on something that I'm not going to see, I'm not going to cover. And here I just did the plot. So the blue line will be the linear. That, hey, I have 100 positions, each one will be 1%. It's equidistant. It will grow linearly, like this, like the blue line. But what SuperMemo is doing actually is this, that it's not adding much, and then asymptotically is growing to reach the same point. That's why what we have seen before, when I was halfway, 15%, I only had 25. Do you see? Sorry. I'm halfway, I only have 25%. It's a big difference. And here you have a massive amount of precision. So what will be the plot is the same as here. 0.01, 0.04, 0.9, 16. It's very tiny increments. until I'm not, for instance, look at that. The 1%, look how many options I need. 10. So the 10 first increments only take into account 1%, while the last one already is double that. It's already 2%. This is awesome. It's something you want. That's all for now. See incrementally. That's actually a feature. It's on purpose, and it's something you really want to keep. That's all for now. See incrementally. Incremental readings. It's time to introduce, or at least to understand, in SuperMemo, the priorities. When we set the priorities with the element priority dialog, and we know now this color coding, is this slider has some interesting behavior. So now it's time to focus on priority protection and how the priority protection can be understood, perceived, as the ultimate litmus test in your SuperMemo collection. Let's see why. So, the priority protection is a metric. You have overall every single day this metric, and in the analytics you can see the chart of every single date. Awesome. So the priority protection is the single most honest indicator of your collection health. Not in the technical sense, which is also a thing in SuperMemo that we will cover much later in the course, but qualitatively as a user. The priority protection reveals what proportion of your knowledge is actually being reviewed on a schedule. You can see it here: toolkit, statistics, analysis, use, priority protection, and items, or for topics. I'm not going to do it because it will be a different section, but just to let you know it's there. And we have an analogy. Think of it as a water line on a ship. The higher the water line, the higher the priority protection value. And the more you cargo, in this case will be knowledge, it's safe and dry. And a low value means important knowledge is sinking into a backlog. It's a pretty good analogy. Then, what priority protection means? Is the value of the most important item that was postponed yesterday. This is the example, let's say the most Wozniak-friendly way to describe it. This implies you use auto-postpone. It's likely you don't. Then another way to express it is whatever is outstanding today, the highest priority. The element with the highest priority that is outstanding and hasn't been reviewed. For instance, a 3% means that you will have if I sort all of the elements in my outstanding queue, or at least the items, the force will be 3%, meaning that only the top 3% of my knowledge is safe. It's safe from being delayed. Anything lower than 3%, so the number is larger, is at risk. And that means that the higher, the better. The higher the number means lower priority, the better. Because let's say it's 50%, that means that I'm at least protecting half of my priority queue. Keep in mind those are percentages and it's relative. Because you could say, hey, I protect 50% of my collection. And I can say, hey, I only protect 1% of my priority queue. Yes, the difference is that you have 40 items a day or whatever. And I have 8,000. So 1% of 8,000 is a lot more, right? So have this in mind. So a high value of a priority protection shows that you have capacity to review your prioritized material on time. So here is a compounding of a factor: how much you import, how much you process, therefore how much you end up creating items, how many you review, and how well you prioritize. Could be let's do this quick case. Could be the case that you have 100 items and you do 90 of them. So there are only 10 left. But the 10 left, some are very high priority. Then it's, hey, you're neglecting priorities and so on, so you're not doing a good job. Could be the case that you have 20,000, you only covered 1%, but are very dead on priorities. So what you are actually getting is the highest value of all of the outstanding thing. So even if it's a lower number, you're doing a lot better job in reality, because your collection is a lot larger, most overcrowded, and so on. So I don't want to extend more. Keep in mind, I could speak hours with examples of this, which I will on the mastery track, but not here. The most important part of this video is that the priority protection is a test that is crucial. Can be like a litmus test. It's not the one that you do. It also means that it's crucial, it's very important. If it's very low, hey, let me import less stuff. Let me slow down and keep processing. Because if you don't, you just make it worse and worse and worse. This is what happened to me. That my collection was growing so fast that the ratio of unprocessed material was more than 80% of my collection. It was extremely hard to process. So that's all for now. And if you ever care about the solutions, wait for the mastery track. It's about how you can check the priority protection in your collection. Yes, it's per collection. And this is distinct. SuperMemo 19 has changed that. So we go to the statistics window, it's there. It says protection. Doesn't say priority protection, but stands for priority protection. The highest priority position outstanding elements in the standing queue. Okay. In SuperMemo 19, you have items and topics by its position. Meaning that in my outstanding queue, the highest element, that is a topic, it's the number 5. So that means that the first 4 are not outstanding, but the 5th is. So I'm just covering the first 5 elements in my priority queue. It's extremely low. And for items, 272. So if I sort, I can actually do that, outstanding. Now let me just filter topics. And do you see? 0.007. In this case, it's actually dummy because it's something I did during a video for the course. It's not something genuine, right? But the genuine will still be this paradox. That is, so I know that because the next repetition, it's actually today. Oh wow, the time of the recording. So those 3 become outstanding today. So this has decreased the priority protection, and this Peterson paradox was already outstanding from last month. Okay, in this backup. And same for the items. If I go to the outstanding queue and I only get items, sorting by priority, so the priority protection is limited by this one. How is the content treated in situated learning? And this is the 0.4, but doesn't say 0.4. It says 272 because in SuperMemo 19 uses the position. And I can know that because look at the element window. It's the same position, 272. So now if I force this and I do the repetition today, now this has been updated. And do you see? Now it's 303. Then the priority protection is whatever is outstanding, the highest item in the priority queue. The highest priority, if this makes sense. So while you do the daily repetitions, this is being updated. If you do some fuzziness in the sorting criteria, perhaps it's not every single repetition, because you do allow repetition time to time, right? So that's it. Then, if we switch to SuperMemo 18, and I open the same collection, do you see I even have the password now? Okay, I don't have the layouts because the layouts depend on the executable file. Do you see now the protection? Why the protection doesn't say 303? Because this is the percentage. And that is the key difference. I'm pretty sure that Wozniak updated this when no one requested this ever is because, I have 3 decimals already, in my case, right? So if your collection is even grow, if it's even larger, like Wozniak's, in the 800,000, almost a million elements, then you need a 5th decimal point, but it's not there. Therefore, you lose precision, you cannot distinguish anymore, and one of the solutions was to use the position instead of the percentage. What is better if you ask me? Percentage, my opinion. But I get that, imagine you use SuperMemo for very assiduously for decades, then I will say, in this case, it's best to use the position. But if you follow this course, 100% of the people who will start using SuperMemo with this course, believe me, you want this, but you cannot do it. But sadly, there's the setting that you can toggle, I actually requested this, it's not being implemented. That let the user decide, okay, make the default the position if you want, but let the user get the percentage if it wants. It's still not a thing at the time of the recording. So the 19.1 is still like that. So that means that anytime you can take a peek of the priority protection. Once you start the day, or any day, anytime. So it's, I have done quite a lot, let me see. Oh, it's very low. So instead of a subset that I wanted to do, let me go through the outstanding, or whatever. You can take some decisions. That's why it's at all times in the statistics window, and you also have it for each day. In the analytics, use tab, and the last tab at the bottom, priority protection, for items and topics. This will look a lot different if you use auto postpone and so on. So there's a lot of context, a nuisance to understand that. That's why we will see it on a dedicated place, on a dedicated section in the mastery track. All of the analytics will be on the mastery. So that's all you need to know for now about the priority protection in the statistics window. Remember, it only reflects today. There's no average and stuff like that. Then, why your priority protection is low? Usually it's the case. So I already take for granted your priority protection will be low. You have inconsistent learning. This more or less will be the case of this backup. That skipping or not finishing daily reps creates a backlog, forcing delays. You just don't use SuperMemo every day. That means that some days, some items become outstanding and are just left outstanding. Another option could be the poor prioritization, as I hinted before. That, you had 100 items and you did 90, but you did items with lower priority before others with higher priority. That is because you don't care about priorities, or you're still getting the hang of it. Too many items are crowded into high priority slots, making it impossible to review them all. This is especially the case if you set priorities in bulk as a newbie, and you will be very prone to have chunks that a lot of items are concentrated in the same range because of a bulk operation, which is the next pattern, massive up-prioritizations. And this overwhelms the system. Imagine that, let me merge my English collection. Once I did that, let me prioritize what is incremental reading. So everything that is English is after everything of incremental reading. Meaning, what is now 80-90% in this collection will become 40 or whatever, right? So everything that is language related, even if it's the most important stuff within the language, it will be still lower than the least important fact in incremental reading. I do this, but what I will create is that I will have a lot of items in high priority. For instance, here I don't have 400, and it's not even 1%. So let's simplify that 1% is 400. So I did this operation, and I have 3% of the priority queue, 1200 items outstanding. then my priority protection will be crazy low, unless I recover from this backlog. We will see this in detail in the mastery track. Usually the mastery track, there's a common pattern that in the Fluency, I just mention that and that's about it. And in the mastery, we actually go through this. So I have the genuine flow and I do trigger the functionalities and all of this. Then, reading the signals. This metric, the priority protection, it's a lagging indicator that provides critical diagnosis information about your habits. That doesn't mean it's necessarily bad, it's just descriptive. For instance, one person can be very import happy, let's say, that everything that has the minimum interest, I import it in my collection, right? So the threshold is very low. That means that this guy will have a lot of unprocessed material in his collection. As long as when that guy imports, sets a priority, it's fine. It will just be harder to set priorities because every time a higher ratio of the collection will be unprocessed, meaning you haven't had the chance to revisit that, meaning you have not had the chance to reset the priority. So at the long term, it's hard. I suggest to do this when you are already a master with priorities. That's why I detected this and let me delete a lot of stuff that wasn't processed. Let me kind of semi reset so it's easier to set priorities. So it's just the habits. Could be a person that has a very high, because by a high priority protection, because imports very few stuff and so on. So it's just a habit. That doesn't mean it's better necessarily. It's a compromise. That means he's exploring very little. There's less exploration to be done, less neural review potential to be done. So it's always a trade-off. Then we have two options. Sudden sharp drop. When this happens, let me actually now do it for real, what I said before in the analytics. Sorry. I said I wouldn't do it, but yeah, let me do it. Use unprotected protection. It's a backup, so ignore most of the stuff here. What happened? Do you see? That's a good example. Is this good or bad? It's, oh my God, it's like 0% or very low and 100. Extremely good, right? That just means that I finished a standing queue and I didn't. But perhaps I was using auto-postpone. So it depends a lot on the context. Since I'm cheating because I use auto-postpone, this 100 means very, very little. It's just, let's say to simplify, that I postpone everything above 5% and some other criteria, meaning that in reality, the priority protection I achieved was 5% because everything else was actually auto-postponed. I achieved 100% because no element was outstanding. That doesn't mean I achieved my goal. I just cheated with auto-postpone. So there's a lot of nuisance here. And then it's, hey, what happens here? That is some days that I didn't finish, but it was quite high. 70% range is pretty low already. But this was 2021. I will need to check how many elements I had there. 2021, I had about 120,000. What about just items? Look at the difference. It's not the same having 5,000 items like here, or 50,000. It's a massive change. We're going to analyze this, all of this, by the way, on the statistics, analytics section of the course, no worries. But here is not the point. It's just that, to emphasize the point, that it's context depending. Depends how you use SuperMemo, what you do, your habits, the actual state of your collection. It's not that, hey, it's this case, this solution. Not as easy as that. Then chronically low value. That's why usually when I do tutoring is, let me know your habits and the state of your collection. Because if I have the state of your collection, it's not enough. Then chronically low value. That every day my priority protection is crap. It's 0 point something. That is a serious systematic problem. This signals unchecked priority bias. So whatever you do, the new extracts Keep in mind, let's do one example. This is 1.3, right? So whatever I do every day, since it's very high priority, if I do extracts, those new extracts will inherit the high priority. If I do close deletions, those items will become high priority because I inherit the priority. Meaning that even if I spend a few minutes or I spend a lot of hours every day, I will end up to the same place. I'm always tackling high priority ranges. Meaning, whatever I create that will become outstanding, or whatever I rep I will rep again, like topics, and they will become outstanding once again, they will always be very high. Meaning, whatever I do, the priority per section will become always super low. I will never get rid of it. Meaning that even if I do more repetitions, like something crazy, I have time to do 1,000 repetitions, I will increase it. Because with those repetitions, I will create new material that goes below what I already covered today. So I just repeat the same thing over and over each day. I'm perpetually there. I'm a victim of the predatory bias. Or I just neglect priorities that I don't care. One of those. Let's introduce what is the golden rule of prioritization in incremental reading. Let's present this case. You hesitate between a lower and a higher priority to set in an element. The rule of thumb, the golden rule, is always to set the lower priority. The lower priority nearly is always better, almost in most cases. This is because the ever-present priority bias, as we have seen in the previous videos. Even if we are aware of this bias, that is not enough. We are still victim of this bias. You always be tempted to rank things higher than it should be. That's why when you're in doubt, choosing the lower priority by default systematically helps you counteract this bias, the priority bias. Let's say that I have three zones of priorities: high, medium, and low. And this is in defense of medium and low. Let's see something they have. Let's see something genuine. Okay, theory of constraints. I don't need that now, it's not high. But is this medium or low? I'm hesitating between those. What I will do is choose a priority in the low range, in the low zone, if this makes sense. Easy. The golden nugget of prioritization. Always use the lower one. And that's it. It's time to talk about the priority bias. It's a cognitive bias that you and everyone else will experience, not just at the beginning with SuperMemo, but always, forever. So the point is to be aware of this bias and how you can overcome or mitigate this bias. So this is an overview of the priority queue, what it is, that the 0 is the highest. The most important element is in the position 1. The queue is relative. So when you change the priority position, the 3rd becomes the 4th, the 999 becomes the 1000, and so on. We have seen that already. Awesome. So what's the rationale of this priority bias? The entire priority system was designed to combat a specific bias, the priority bias. Because we have the natural tendency to believe that what is new, I just found this article, it's awesome, it's super important. We have the recency bias, right? So every time when we set priorities, we will set priorities higher than the last time. And it will be a never-ending reprioritization that it will make priorities useless. Because what is more recent will be more important by default. So just sorting by recency will be the same as sorting by priority, almost. But why does priority bias happen? Because we instinctively underestimate the value of sheer volume of articles and knowledge we have already collected. First, we forget. My collection, I have 19,000, I have extracts, and not just sources, but I can tell you in sources, I have more than 5,000. I still have some images. Roughly speaking, I have 4,000 and something references. Oh wow, 4,000 sources, articles, books, whatever. It's a massive deal. It's a sheer volume. But I underestimate the value of all of this because it's not present in my mind, all of that. I know, yeah, this is super awesome because it's novel, but I cannot compare it with the 4,000 I already have. Perhaps I've read, in the process of reading, or just waiting to be read. They are just collected. So, going deeper into the psychology of underestimation. Okay. We have introduced priorities. Now it's time to know what is a priority bias. Okay, so let's continue with the psychology of this underestimation. Our biology, our memory is biologically weak at estimating the size of our own knowledge, the true cost of learning, and the power of forgetting. It's the same like astronomy, right? Yes, I know what a mile is or a kilometer, but do I know what 10 billion or trillion of kilometers or miles are? I cannot comprehend the distance of the sun and the earth, right? It's too massive. So then, the result is a constant underestimation of what we already know. We know more than we think we do, even though we forget a massive deal of what we learn, and the volume of material we have waiting in our incremental learning process, which for me is in the more than 28,000. Let's follow an analogy. The priority bias makes us feel like the shiny new discovery is a golden nugget, while we forget the treasure chest we have already been filling. So we have a lot of treasures, prior golden nuggets, but one because it was especially unexpected. Oh, it's super shiny golden nugget. But hey, I had one from yesterday, right? We undervalue those already. Recency bias as well. So then, how SuperMemo tries to combat this bias, because it's not an entire solution. The priority queue makes this bias visible. While you keep using SuperMemo, after a while you realize, as some people say, hey bro, I'm getting always the same stuff. I'm getting always the most recent stuff I imported, and the older stuff is into oblivion. Here you go. You just realize you're a victim of the priority bias. So you can physically see how large volumes of new, exciting material displays older material from your focus, pushes this away in a way because you will do only the high priority stuff, so everything else is postponed or waiting for you. But before going there, you will import more stuff, so it is forever waiting for you. Then, SuperMemo automates the management of information overflow. Through what? Through the priority queue, helping you to reconcile volumes of learning with high knowledge retention. SuperMemo allows the user to increase their learning volume without the constant worry of losing their hard-earned knowledge. That, hey, I have a chest with golden nuggets, but as long as I keep using SuperMemo and I do a spaced repetition, I will keep the value of the chest while I'm getting new golden nuggets. So you need to worry about that. So quote, with the priority queue, you can nearly take away the moderation factor and increase the volume of learning even further without undue worry about your hard-earned knowledge. So it's more or less more like incompensating of what we just said. That's okay, I turn off this worry because I know I trust the algorithm, but I not just trust it. I know how it works, at least at high level, and I do prioritize. I can trust the algorithm, but if I don't prioritize, you're getting to nowhere. You need to prioritize. Then, we'll leave it until here, because this is part of the course. The priority is so a big deal that I will have covered this in the theory course. I will have a standalone course, just a theory, because it's massive. More in still more detail, all of the biases there are and so on. From the more theoretical perspective, not necessarily applied in the context of incremental reading, but without the SuperMemo. So remember, there's always a bias. You always have a bias. That's why you need time to adjust. And prioritize well takes time. So let's cover a part of prioritization in incremental reading. Prioritization is difficult before it becomes easy. Is such an obvious statement. But that means that first it's difficult, but eventually it will not be as hard. It's hard to acquire the skill, but once you have this skill, it becomes second nature, we could say. It becomes easy. So let's see very high level this transition, or this path. So we have the prioritization puzzle. You have the big idea. Prioritization is a skill, a soft skill. It's difficult first, but then becomes easier with practice. So even if you have a lot of knowledge, even if with this course I provide you a lot of knowledge that is more tacit, is more hard to acquire or to transmit, you still need your own practice. You cannot master priorities without ever practicing prioritization. But that's the good news. Struggling with priorities often indicates a strong hunger for knowledge and creativity. Because if you don't, that means you don't have much of an overflow. It's doable. You can finish your standing queue. Therefore, you can keep neglecting priorities. Right? Which have other consequences beyond that, by the way. Not the point of this video. Then, the goal is to win the battle against the information overload by learning to prioritize honestly and effectively. Effectively is one dimension that we will see in this course, and honestly, this is the hardest. The bias, priority bias, will prevent you from that. So then we have seen the priority scale once goes to 0 to 100, okay? 0 the most priority critical and so on, and 100 whatever can wait, the least important. But your task is to develop a sense where each piece of information belongs on this spectrum. If you think everything is top priority, you're just at the beginning of your journey. One quick analogy. You have a textbook, a physical paper textbook, right? And the teacher asks you, hey, highlight what you think is more important in the text. And you will highlight almost the entire stuff. Too much highlighting. You're at the beginning of this journey. So there's a mental workout to get there incrementally. The first one is the forget one test. You're trying to decide between two items, or elements, and not necessarily items, right? So you can ask this question to yourself. If I had to permanently delete one of these, which would that be? It's like the dilemma that, hey, you have two people in a train, and you have to save one, but the other will die. More or less it's the same scenario. So which one you will delete? You're actually answering the question, what item is more important than the other? What item has higher priority than the other? Why this works? Because this exercise forces you to compare real-world value and application of each item, revealing which one is really more important to you. And this is time-bound. Today, for us, will be item A, and tomorrow could be item B, because I have changed my priorities. Hey, I can no longer apply this to my job because I have changed my job, right? As an example. Then, second mental workout. How low can you go? Challenge your own sense of urgency with this exercise. Take an item and try to have it your lowest priority you can stomach. Obviously, this won't work at the very beginning if your collection is just 100 elements. But you'll reach a point that you have information overflow, you cannot process your outstanding queue, then is when you can start doing those exercises. Can you go to 10%, 20, 66, 99, you will have a realization. You will quickly see that you can live without immediate access to a large portion of your knowledge. This helps break the everything is urgent mindset. For instance, I notice as a backup, I have for 8,563 items outstanding. In my new collection, is not much lower than that, because I focus on this course, sacrificing my own usage of SuperMemo. But hey, I can live without immediate access to the knowledge. Large portion of my knowledge is still waiting. Can I do 66? Let me show you something. This is the astounding queue. I have only the items now. 8,369, and I sort by priority. Now once again, it was already there. Do you see? I have 85, 70s, 60s. I'm not going to see that. In order to see those items, I will have to do like 8,000 item repetitions, more than what is becoming outstanding every single day, and the items I keep creating. On top of that, I have to do 8,000 more to catch up, assuming I don't lapse, I don't forget. That means that it will take a large proportion of your knowledge that we won't be immediate. You need to break this mindset. Accept the delays. Then, using the system stats to your advantage. SuperMemo has a priority protection statistic. We will focus later on in this section. That shows how items are safe. So the strategy. By assigning a lower priority, a higher percentage, you can push items beyond the protected zone. Meaning that, hey, if I do the daily repetitions, I will see up to 5% of my priority queue. And everything else will be waiting. But if it's a lower priority, remember the number is higher, like 20%. In my collection, I'm not going to see this. I will need to freeze my collection for months and months until I get there. So what's the benefit? If you have created too many similar questions, constellations from the same parent, the same source, that are crowding your review sessions, you can send most of them out of view and focus only on one or two that capture the essence of that topic. That's usually is what I do. Usually it's the definition or to have the name, and the most important thing, more or less is the reason I imported that. And I do those sometimes right away without the incrementalism to guarantee I have those, and the rest waiting. So how to nudge your SuperMemo priorities? You know that the algorithm is not perfect, but it's smart. But it can give you hits, very implicitly. So you can adjust influence of an item priority by adjusting its interval. Something we'll see much later is that we can reschedule elements or change in a way, in a different way we're going to express it, that we can modify the interval. But modifying the interval, consequently, will modify the priority. Yes. In this section, we're not going to see that, because we need to introduce the rescheduling and so on. So we'll understand the priorities, how they work. You can set priorities explicitly, as we have seen already, or doing something else that as a side effect will also change the priority directly. And something else, or indirectly, like when I reprioritize that element, other elements in the range shift one position, right? And there are a ton more. So for example, the system suggests 30-day interval, but you feel the item is more critical. You can shorten it to 11 days, but this will also modify the priority. So the result, you're telling SuperMemo, this cannot wait that long. This signals item's priority. Then, if you see this happening, is that an implicit cue? This implicit hint that, hey, if you think the interval is too long for the priority you're getting, perhaps you want a higher priority. Then what's the takeaway? Prioritization is a marathon, not a sprint. It's one of the features, one of the skills you will master the latest. It will take the longest to master. It doesn't happen overnight. It requires conscious, deliberate effort and practice over and over and over and over. And the effects are not immediate. So sometimes you will need some years just to see the effect you have done on the first months. So you did it, whatever, but you're not going to see the result until much later. Then, by consistently applying these mental exercises and strategies, remember the forget one test, let one die, and how long you can go, how low you can set priorities to items, you will develop an intuitive sense of knowledge value, turning information overload into structured and manageable learning process. Easy to say, hard to do. Let's continue with priorities. This case is exceptional because it's one single slide, but it's important to cover that. The incremental introduction to priorities, you do gradually introduce priorities and find details and so on, it's stressful. What is a stressful prioritization? It's okay to ignore the priority queue at first, because too much information, I don't get it, or doesn't make sense, because I don't have information overflow, or it's too tiny, it's an overkill. Then this stress will become gradual because your collection will grow to the point that it will become chaotic unless you use priorities. So you only need prioritization when your collection becomes too large. So you can do gradually introduce prioritizations over time. So it's not as stress. It will be stressful at the beginning. That I don't get it, why numbers, doesn't make sense, stuff like this. So you're going to start very simple, that you do a threshold. And this threshold will separate just two parts of the priority queue. Important and important. I want that, it can wait. Whatever binary relationship you want. I have set 22, you can do 25, 75, Pareto principle, 20-80. Depends on how much you import, how much you read, and stuff like that. But you get my point. Then, in this course, we're going to see different strategies. That you can have 3 different stages, 3 different sections of the priority queue, qualitatively. Or 4, 5, 6, 7. I think on the Fluency, it's up to 7. And for the mastery track, there will be one for 15. The one I do personally, that is 30. And then the true master, that is just using the 100 spots here. The absolute 100 spots. Okay, but you should take this incrementally. First you start with 2, 3, 4, or perhaps with 3 you go already with 5, and you become more granular, and so on. As your collection grows, and your skill also grows. So as your sense of your value sharpens, you want more precision. You might feel this article must be in my top 3. This might lead to using decimal priorities or ranking by queue position. Hey, now it's too large, now I need more precision. So it's not 2%, it's 2.3%, right? And perhaps this, instead of 22, it will become just 5 and 95. Then it's, hey bro, this is almost pointless, right? It's the entire collection is in the same package. Therefore, I need to update my strategy. And I need to do more stages, qualitative stages, like high, medium, low, and some others that we will see. And eventually, I'm not in that position yet, pun intended, that it's so massive, I'm into the millions, that I need more than 4 decimal points, which SuperMemo doesn't allow, that I will start ranking by the queue position. But that is someone who has been using incremental reading for 3 decades. It's just to make my point. I hope you reach that point if you spend 3 decades using SuperMemo. That is more or less the point of this video. Incremental introduction to prioritization is so stressful. That's why keep it simple, even if it's binary, and upgrade it time to time. And you'll realize when it's time to upgrade it, that it's too broad, I need more precision, I upgrade. So let's cover now the cultivating a sense of priority in incremental reading. Assigning accurate and honest priorities is a skill that is cultivated over time with deliberate practice. It's not an immediate talent that, hey, I'm pretty good at this since day one. It's common for newbies, beginners, to struggle to distinguishing between different priority levels or zones. It's not just, oh, instead of 2, it's 3%, but more qualitatively the zones. High, low, mid, and so on. And the beginner may not be able to sense the difference between even that. It's 30 or 60. Is this medium or low? Stuff like that, right? So here's the beginner toolkit. Starting with a simple scale. Before, we just presented a binary, just a threshold, that the threshold separates high and low. Okay, let's do something beyond that. We have high, medium, and low. So you can have the 10% is high priority. The medium priority is between 1350, and low priority is 70 to 90. But wait. That doesn't add up. They are wholes. What about 20%? What about 60%? That's more or less the idea I wanted to convey, that A, it's not hard-coded, depends on you, on how your collection grows and how fast you process. So the most you import and less you process, you will go more nitpicking, the high priority, and the opposite is true. If you process a lot, you could afford more percentage here. So now, for the example, I will hardcode 1, and I will do it like this. At the second half of the priority queue, I consider that is low priority. The someday, nice to know, it can wait. Then the first 20 is high priority. Something that is directly related to my goals is a must known. And within 20 and 50, it's something interesting, examples, information that provides valuable context of something that is already high, and it's something you should know. Must, should, must know, should know, nice to know. So with this, we already have 3 ranges. Then, you don't have to upgrade necessarily to a 4, 5, or so on later on to be more precise. But what you could do, perhaps, is modifying this. That now we have 60 instead. Because what's going to happen? I import low priority stuff, low priority, pam, 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 pam. It's 50% of my collection already. Half of my collection. If I keep importing to the bottom, let's simplify, it's always 100%, I'm pushing other stuff. So if I'm importing always here on the 100 that is blue, whatever is in here, it becomes green already. Because most of my collection was imported on that priority, but I'm pushing those away. Because most of half the collection is low priority, if this makes sense. Let's put numbers. Let's say I have 1,000 articles. If I import more articles, let's say 500, I will have 1,500. 150 is half of the collection, right? If now we import 2,000 more and are low priority, I want this range, I can no longer afford this range. They will be on this range, some of them. Because now the collection would be 2,000 and something, or even 3,000. I only have 550 in the first half. You know what I mean? It's just arithmetics. That's why you should do this, change the percentage, or you realize that, oh shoot, I am over-importing. I'm importing too much low priority stuff. We will cover that in other videos, not now. The when you over-import. Then, honing your instincts, from conscious choice to intuitive sense. So first, you don't have the habit, so it's an effortful decision every time. But as more you do it, the more practice you do, the most automatized it becomes, the most quick it becomes. First, be ruthless with your deprioritization, decreasing the priority. Don't be afraid of an article or an extract, or even delete it. Sometimes I even delete it. That I do the next rep, it becomes outstanding. I see it, it's bro. That was 5% priority, 2% priority. It's not even needed. Could happen. Trust your gut feeling. If the article feels like a slog, you find it your mind wandering, Set low priority, move on. Be honest with yourself. Embrace the eureka, the aha moment. When you encounter a golden nugget, especially if you were not expecting to find one there, take insight of a fundamental concept, immediately assign a high priority. If it's a golden nugget, it deserves a high priority. What is different is your definition of high priority. In my collection, a high priority is 0 point something percent. If it's 1.2 or 2 point something, I will need some weeks to get there because of my priority protection. And regularly review your queue. It's not that, okay, everything today is already prioritized and I'm done. No, because when you see this article again, or this extract, perhaps this priority has changed. Because now you have more knowledge, now this is redundant, because you have learned this from somewhere else, or the difficulty is a lot easier, or you have moved on life, whatever, you no longer find this interesting, or you don't need it, then this priority needs to be changed. Or it will become outdated. This collection is prioritized for your past self, not your current self. So as you progress, you will find that the more you prioritize, the more natural and automatic it feels. That, oh man, I always get what I wanted, what I needed. Thank you, my past self, for that. It will take a while to get there. This evolving intuition is the hallmark of a successful incremental reader. Because if you don't, either if you neglect priorities still, or you don't care enough, or you haven't put time and effort enough yet, your experience will be different. That, I don't get what I want, what is this? This is too much noise, I don't care about that, And some people actually stop using SuperMemo because of that. They don't get how important priorities are. Priorities are a must. If you have to prioritize the features of incremental reading, the very first one will be prioritization. Then, to wrap up the video, think yourself as a sculpture, and the vast amount of information as you block a marble. So you start with a block and a square, like a Minecraft kind of thing, right? A block. And then, incrementally, gradually, you create whatever you want, usually a face or a chest, right? So your sense of priority is the chisel, allowing you to chip away the extraneous material and reveal the masterpiece of knowledge within. So you take apart the extraneous, the material that is outside of the face, let's say that it's noise, you delete that, or prioritize very low, it goes away, and you have the shape of the face. So this metaphor is like, you could see priorities like this, like on a sculpture. You won't see the face right away. And you will make a pretty face at the beginning. You will do, oh, look at this weird nose, or, yeah, I see the pattern of a face, but it's not, it's enough to get it's a face, the concept of a face, but it's not pretty to look at, right? And the more you hone your abilities to prioritize, the better it will look, that sculpture, to follow the analogy. So this is how you cultivate a sense of priority. That, hey, here I never prioritize, so this is random. What I get is arbitrary. But once I have videos with my Zenny collection, it's no. Hey, thank you for sharing that. Like in Twitter, someone shared for me a golden nugget. Oh yeah, thank you. I imported that with 2.7% priority. And they ask, why 2.7? Why not 3? Why not 2? Why this decision? Because you will be able to answer this question by the end of this section of the course. We're going to focus on the art of honest deprioritization. It's hard to do it. It's hard to be honest. When you have to set lower priorities, meaning it's likely you will send that to the oblivion. So what is the core challenge? Our own cognitive limitations. We're human. The practice of actively and regularly deprioritizing knowledge is crucial for long-term success. Yet it is often described as very hard and very painful, which is actually true, especially at the beginning. But this difficulty stems from a psychological resistance to confronting our own cognitive limitations. We must accept a fundamental truth. We cannot know everything that you want to know. We have to filter, to select. In my time frame, in my entire lifetime, what I can learn is limited. I cannot learn everything there is, obviously, but not even everything I want to. Even if I filter just what I want, it's still too much. I need still to filter more. That's the pain. You have to learn how to let go of that opportunity. That I could do it, but I prefer this other one that will prevent me to do this. Not in my lifetime. Therefore, the overloaded mind is a leaky vessel or bucket. To retain what is most important, we must be willing to let some things go. A little analogy. It's like not only rephrased of different maxims. If you want success, you need to choose. Then, what is the key to success? The consistent deprioritization, setting lower priorities. In a learning system with a high volume of information, which will happen eventually in your collection, you're doomed to this situation. As long as you use incremental reading how it's meant to be used, you will face this. Then, consistent deprioritization is the key to your own success. We have said that. Okay, let's dig further on this. Then, the consistent deprioritization is the most effective way to improve your priority protection. Remember, it's a metric. If it's 5%, means you are covering the 0 to 5% of your priority queue. Meaning, what is 6 out of 100, it's waiting for you. Ensuring that the most critical knowledge is reviewed at the right time. So at least you can guarantee that 5% is not neglected. I say 5% as an example, but doesn't have to be 5%. It's not like the p-value in research that has to be 5%. In my case, it's lower than that. And if you have a huge collection, could be lower than 1%, your priority protection. Because if I have 500,000 elements, 1% is a lot more. So don't think of the value as something hard-coded. Then think of it as a triage for your brain. The consistent deprioritization is a triage for your brain, ensuring vital information receives the attention it needs to survive. Because if you don't, that memory will die. And those memories are of more high value, high importance, high priority. So imagine like your brain is a huge hospital with thousands of people, sick people. And you need to triage. And whatever you don't choose will die. And that person will face death which could be prevented by choosing that person. You must accept this pain. You have to choose. There's not enough time for that. Then, a shift in perspective from rejection to scheduling. So to overcome this psychological hurdle, reframe what it means to deprioritize. So deprioritize is not about labeling knowledge as unimportant or useless. Instead, creating a relative gradient of importance, sequencing your attention over a lifetime. Meaning that, okay, like going back to the patients, in a huge hospital, you're just the patient number 20,465. I make this up. So, wait online. It's very likely you will die. You will pass away during waiting, but, well, some people won't, right? You never know. It's a change on the scope. I'm not thinking I'm sending those people to the guaranteed death. What I do is I'm just sequencing. You are very far away. That's what I'm doing. Deprioritizing is not an act of rejection. I'm not telling no, you're not going to be attended in this hospital. is that you're not going to be attended before these are 20,000 people. It's not the same thing. So deprioritization is not an act of rejection, but an act of strategic long-term scheduling. Long-term, that can be for decades. Like what I have rest, what I have remaining in my lifetime. Hey, I'm sending this to when I will be, hopefully I will get there, retired. Perhaps I have more important stuff during those decades, and this will be sent and be postponed even further, and I won't see it and I will die without seeing it. Most likely, most of the things will happen like that, but some, they don't. That's why I'm not sending them to their death. It's a change in perspective. Next is attention now and attention later. A low priority item isn't deleted from your collection. It's simply moved to the back of the queue, or the bottom of the queue. We could see in practice, most of the time will be the same, the equivalent, like dismissing. It's not deleted, but it's so far away in the priority queue that you're not going to see it. For instance, Piotr Wozniak, in his own collection, he has the longest collection, at least in time. Sometimes he postponed a repetition for more than 15 years. He's 15 years late when that was scheduled, right? And it has been because of a search. Meaning that if 15 years later he hadn't had a related interest, that would have kept waiting and waiting. So you never know. It's not sending to death. It's just sending to a very long outstanding, to the future. Most likely to their death, but it's not exactly the same. Not always. The item may be revisited months or even years later when you have the capacity, like the example I did, Modern Liar, of 15 years later. Wait, not 15 years later, is whatever the interval plus 15 years. You are 15 years over time. This changes the framework from painful, important versus important, from the painful, important versus unimportant decision to more manageable attention now versus attention later strategy. This later can be some decades. You don't even know because it's not about the date. I'm not scheduling this for 2025 or 2040. No. I put it at the bottom of my priority queue and this could be whatever years. Then the actionable guideline for honest deprioritization. Here are two rules that you can do. Rule of thumb. That is already something we have seen and is the golden rule of prioritization. If you hesitate between lower priority and higher priority, use a lower. It's always guaranteed it's better. Gotcha. But we are adding a second now. The honesty check. If all of your elements get priorities of 1 and 10%, let's say, something that you always work with, could be 5%, 20, whatever, you will identify yourself that when you import in your collection, you always have a range, right? And most of the time you work on that range. Then you're not being honest. You're victim of your own biases. And whatever you do is perpetually within that range. Then some of the new material must be down. 80s, 90s, depends on your collection, how many folders you have, and the ratio, folders versus topics, memorized topics and items. For instance, a third of my collection are folders, are just placeholders in the priority queue. Therefore, this is not that meaningful for me. Depends on your collection. That's because I deleted a lot of stuff. That's why I have this weird ratio. Then this provides a simple, measurable way to audit your own behavior and ensure you are truly prioritizing. We reached the end of the slides, but I want to share one example. It's bittersweet, but it's real. And the older you get, the more obvious it is. So you may have had friends or just colleagues. So it's not a very close friend. There are some degrees, right? Okay. It's just a buddy, whatever. You enjoy this relationship for years, but at some point, it stops. It goes slow, gradually, incrementally, lower and lower. Let's say it was friends, we were in college, then everyone lives in a different city or even a different country, and it's not the same experience. We don't see every day. We are not studying the same thing that we had in common. We have families and so on, right? More or less the cliche. Okay. This is something like deprioritizing this relationship. I'm talking to you less often. I don't enjoy much of your company as before, right? And sometimes sucks because it's not something you desire. It just happens in life. To the point that you don't even know when was the last time you saw that person, that friend. You were not even aware that day was the last day we will see each other, right? So it's the same thing. It will be an item that it's in my collection, it's in my memory. I didn't forgot that person, but it's just this. It's a memory to me. I'm not going to see that person again in my life. It's hard, but it's honest. It's honest. Most likely, most of that people you're not going to see again. Same for items. I hope you got the analogy. And then, it's not a big deal. Perhaps I dramatized a little here, but it's the point of this video. You need to accept you cannot be friends with everyone you have been in your life. You need to prioritize. Prioritizing, spending time with person A means you're not spending time with person B and C and D, and so on. And the more you distribute, the less time you spend with each person individually, right? See for items. There's way too much information. From this information, what you select is still too much. From what you prioritize, it will be still too much. So you have to make this choice. I'm setting a low priority, meaning it's extremely likely I will never see it again, even though that doesn't mean this. I can recover that by serendipity, by search, by subset, and whatever that may be. But most of the time, you're sending stuff to oblivion. And it's just what it is. If you don't use incremental reading, you're doing the same thing, minus memorizing, you forget a lot more, and with this forgetting, you are less aware of this. Imagine you have like a software that reminds you every single friend, every single buddy, every single acquaintance you had in life, and reminding, hey, you haven't seen that person in 20 years, this guy in 5 years, and so on. You will have the impression that, oh shoot, it's worse than I thought. This is what happens in incremental reading. It's on your face, because I'm seeing I have 19,000 topics waiting for me, but I don't have the time for them. Even though I selected this, there's more stuff waiting for me to import. It's not even in my collection. Imagine that. Hope this helps. So incrementally. This is just what it is. There's nothing new. It's just the awareness could be more painful, could create it. It's just that the fact that you are aware of this, of what you're missing out, is what it makes it more painful in that case, or bittersweet. So we would say there are two common malpractices. Originally, I decided to shoot this in one single video, but then I realized it was long enough, dense enough, so we'll focus on one now, the indiscriminate mass Up-Prioritization. And later we'll focus on the priority inflation. So let's start. So this video I want to share something about priorities. So usually people, when they start with priorities, with incremental reading, they struggle, yes. But there are some, let's say, common errors or malpractice that it degrades the collection over time. Meaning, it's like a paradox at some degree, that the most time you invest prioritizing, the worse it becomes. Because it's a malpractice. You are not doing the right stuff. I want to share that, even we haven't actually seen yet how to prioritize in bulk. We'll do with this section of the course. So the indiscriminate mass up-prioritization, increasing the priority in bulk, we haven't seen that yet. We will in this section. But first I want to cover it high level before telling you actually how it is done. Because if you do it ahead of time, it's very likely you do more harm than anything else. Then, the indiscriminate mass up-prioritization is the primary cause of sudden drops in priority protection. Remember, priority protection is that last outstanding element that you cover on your daily reps. Everything else is not protected and should be avoided. You should avoid sudden drops in priority protection. How this is caused? By changing the priority for large sets of items or elements, not necessarily items. Should be done with extreme care, preferably using the spread function to create gradient rather than uniform high priority. User query, because it's almost arbitrary, can be almost anything. Leches, the items I'm latching the most, or whatever exam I have, boom, or a concept group, so this could be whatever. So it's like an asterisk. Okay. The long story short, if it's prioritized, you increase it, but you maintain the relative difference between them. You should avoid that at all times. That's why I'm first telling you this before actually displaying the feature, because I want to really emphasize that. It's a power that you have that usually the consequence, it's too much for you. I paid the cost for that a few times. So even if I was very knowledgeable and I have taken extreme precaution, I messed up. Because it takes a lot of time to get used to priorities, and when you do it in bulk, it's just asking for trouble. So this is one of the most common errors. To experience that. In order to get mastery with priorities, you need to be a victim of those. There's no way you can bypass them, avoid them. The point of this course is not to avoid them at all. Is to experience them, understand them, learn from them, and finally overcome those. That's the real key to success. So now let's follow up with the second malpractice, very common malpractice, about prioritization in incrementally. And that is what I call the priority inflation. So let's dig into that. Like in economics, or months or years, the user internal standard for what constitutes a high standard, a high priority, can drift upwards. This is very telling, right? Usually you won't ask that to someone else. It will be really unlikely that you, in real life, you have people who are also SuperMemo users, right? So you cannot compare. So you just use your standard. Hey, for me 10% is high priority. 10 or lower, right? Now it's 5 or lower. For me, it's 1.5 or more. 2%, 2.5, I'm not going to see that. It's beyond my priority protection, right? So first, it's personal, subjective, and it's dynamic. Depends on the growth and the state of my collection and how I use SuperMemo. It's quite complex. But the point is that, for instance, what was considered 30% now might be rated 15 because I considered this 30% to be too low. I have one analogy before we get that. It's inflation. So what happens when I was a kid? In my case, I changed the currency. I grew up with peseta in Spain and then with the euro. Okay. But it's been long enough, 25 years or 24, with the euro, the same currency. Gotcha. For instance, the dog food that I buy I started, it was on the expensive, so in the premium grade. Okay. I don't even remember. It was in the 40s, 50s, and so on. But later I realized, hey, now it's 60, 64, 68, 72, 78. It's bro, every time it's more expensive. Sometimes, even within the same year, I don't need to wait for the next year for the price to increase. It's the same brand, the same product, the same quality. Everything is the same. It's just more expensive. Which now it's twice as expensive as before for the same product. Even though my salary is not twice as before even. But that's a different topic. Therefore, now if you tell me, hey, this dog food of 12 kilos, I don't know, about 25 pounds, I think, it's 30, it will be about $80, or well, 78 euros, right? Yeah, it's premium, it's on the expensive side, but I have my reference, that's the normal. That's why if I compare some years ago, when my dog was a puppy, oh, now 40 or 50, that sounds cheap, it's affordable, right? Imagine we talk about priorities. Oh, it's in the 70s, and it was in the 50s. Oh wow, it's a substantial change, even though it has been only for the inflation. Relatively speaking, it's the exact same priority, it's the same quality, it's the same product. It's just in a different time stamp that has increased the cost of living. So what I considered back in the day 30, oh, that's affordable. Now, no, that's too low. I need 15 for that. So you live in a constant, gradual, constant, but very slowly progressing inflation. This is also true because the more you use SuperMemo, the more elements you will have, the more folders you will have. Topics, memorized topics, don't necessarily, depends. Usually this will grow, but could be more or less static. If you import more or less what you process, you more or less have the same bandwidth. So that's why gradual inflation leads to the same crowding effect as acute priority bias. This is why regular, honest reassessment of the entire priority spectrum guided the priority protection metric, which this is dynamic, and this is why SuperMemo tells this metric every single day. You will have it always at all times. And with SuperMemo 19, you have it in position, not in percentage. Remember that. So this is why regular, honest reassessment of your entire protection spectrum, and this is vital for the long-term discipline. That's why later you need to fine-tune so much. You're so close to zero that you start using decimals. And you will realize some videos of Piotr Wojciech that he uses up to 4 decimal points. And it's the maximum. SuperMemo cannot use more than 4 decimals. That's why later what you do is, oh shoot, I need more precision than this. That's on this case, that is very advanced already. I'm not there yet. I use 2 decimals. For now, you will rely on the position because you need more. You will rely on the position because the percentage, it's not enough. That's why Piotr Wojciech decided, I'm pretty sure, that priority protection is by position now because he required that extra precision. So remember, unconsciously, your daily life updates what you consider expensive. Hey, for dog food, it's expensive. For a burger, for a, I don't know, for a soda can, whatever you buy, bottled water or rice, whatever, you have a reference point. But this will shift across time. It's more obvious with what is more expensive, like an apartment, right? Let's have this reference. Where my parents live, when I lived there with them, now, this is more than 200,000 euros, even though the building is like 40-something years old. And it was brand new, Usually when it's brand new, it's more expensive than used. It was in pesetas. It was a different currency than euros. But translating to euros, it will be just, I think, 15,000, something like that. From 15,000 to 200,000 being second-hand, not new. It's a major difference, right? It has been inflation. I think it's a good analogy. So, if you had the flow, just to make my point and to wrap up the video, there are some users who use incremental reading, but they have too much friction with SuperMemo, so therefore they send the flashcards, the items, to Anki or some other app. So they have the flow of importing, extracting, and closing, and once they do the closing, disappears from SuperMemo, right? More or less we could say that, hey, in this case you don't have inflation because you don't accumulate items. Whatever you produce goes away. You know what I mean? Therefore, you always have a constant flow movement, let's say 20,000 elements, and it stays consistent. Because what you apply done and then have flashcards and so on, it will be moved, exported. And you import more material that you will do extracts and so on. So you're in a constant flow that whatever it is, 10,000, 20,000, it's about that. So it's not a big deal. And the inevitable priority inflation. This is more long term, but if you just do the fluency and you move on, so you never apply, you will never do the mastery track, keep this in mind. Eventually, you will be a victim of the priority inflation. And even if you're aware, the awareness is not enough. You won't prevent that just because you're aware of that. I'm a prime example of this. This is tough. Prioritizing well is tough. It takes practice and honesty. If you don't do it, you're just lying to yourself, and you will just hurt your future self, not anyone else. So what you think you are postponing and solving today, you're actually messing around tomorrow or in the future. Remember that. By the way, there's more stuff, but it will be only on the mastery track, because priorities are a massive deal. Now it's time to introduce something not official, but is extremely convenient, is what I call priority zones, or ranges, more mathematically. So when I want to apply priority, here with this dialog, I have 100 different places, which is not 1, 2, 3, 4, as we have seen already. It's a massive deal, right? Then I can heuristically say, hey, let's use the red, yellow, more or less the colors, right? Just still not enough. I want to have meaningful labels for that. So I will distribute the outstanding queue into zones. Then, remember this fact that the slider is not linear. So I'm going to present different strategies. There will be a dedicated video for each one of those with some meaningful real examples and use cases. Here is just the overview and the more meta experience. So remember this fact, the gray will be linear, and then what SuperMemo does, that you have more precision at higher levels of priorities and lower, much lower precision in the low priority range. So usually what I suggest is to take this incrementally, no pun intended. So you will have just two zones. At the very beginning, a threshold determines above this threshold means low priority, above the threshold means high priority. Then on this dialog, it will be like this, because remember that the all-P dialog is not linear. So now if I put 25, I more or less halfway already. And if I put 50, I'm 3/4, right? And if I put 2%, is what? 2%? That's more than 10 already, right? Okay. So just to help you, I included both. I have spent my time to do this. So you have a threshold that, hey, it could be, I don't know. Can you take a guess? Which number would that be? Lock it in, and we will go later on in this video. So later is, okay, now I have a backlog, now I have information overflow, so now I can have a 3-tier action model that they have high, medium, and low, or action, growth, and backlog. Action, what I'm currently doing, I'm using this already, and growth, do I need this? You're growing your collection, you're growing your knowledge. And backlog is, yeah, for someday or for reference. I'm not going to actively do any of that. It's a good approach. And you have, once again, some thresholds. And now the thresholds are, as already mentioned, 20%, 80%. So the growth is 60%, is more than the entire section of the priority queue. Then, as your collection grows, you can do other zones, or other models with more zones. You don't have to do one by one, meaning that if you have 3, and bro, it's not enough now, I need more precision, you don't have to go to the number 4. You can go straight to 5, 10, or whatever. This is just some examples. Remember, we will have dedicated videos for that. Only on the mastery track, by the way. So you have like this. I need this daily. I'm actually building this. I want to maintain this knowledge, or it might be useful someday. Some heuristic approaches, right? Then, this is a recommendation, but the priority range depends on you. For instance, I have a huge proportion of folders. So 20%, so most of this, the attic, it might be useful someday, is already taken with dead elements that are dismissed. There's no content. Are dismissed, but without content, are applied done, right? So have this in mind that perhaps I will decrease that, but because in my case, 1/3 of my collection is dismissed because I deleted a lot of stuff. Okay. Then you can progress with 5, 6, 10, and so on. Another thing you can do while you progress this, as your collection grows, your experience and skill set also grows, is that you can reuse the models. Meaning, I have this, the one I explained, right? R4, okay. This is from the community. It's different. They call it urgent, applicable, interest, and exploration zone. Okay, but it's the same thing. What you could do is, okay, now I'm getting used to that. Now it's too much, like, oh my God, almost 50% of the priority queue is exploration zone, is too much. Now let me be more explicit, more concrete. So what you can do is divide this. So from 4 zones, you go to 10 zones because you divide each zone by 3, but the first one, that you keep it like it is. So you will go directly an equivalent of this model that you have up to 10 zones, and you can see that, hey, how it looks is kind of weird, right? And it's more or less like a reverse mirror, that the maximum to the left, the maximum, the highest, and the lowest will be more precise, and the more to the medium, it's less precise. It's a different approach. There are some use cases for that. I did this on purpose. We'll see that on the mastery track. Or you have this, that more or less is increasing, so every time it's larger and larger. First it's 10%, then it's 20%, then it's 30%, and then it's 20 again, 10 again, and 10 again. So it is increasing. You want less precision, but then you want like some percentage smaller for the, oh, this is very at the bottom, right? This is always a pattern. Do you see? Critical, core is higher, high interest is even higher than core, and so on. It's always the same thing. Library, much larger than workshop, which is larger than cockpit. It's like some kind of a spaced repetition at some degree. So then, you can do this, going back, even more incremental. You don't have to switch from 4 zones to 10 directly. No, it's, hey, you know what? Most of the time, I'm using those high priority ranges. So only the applicable zone, I split into 3 zones. Now I do 3.6 up to 8.4, 8.4 to 18.5, because I had until 28, right? The range was too high. Awesome. Could be 28, 30, 33, depends on your collection. How many dismissed elements you have, how much you import, and stuff like this. But to simplify, it's this approach. Then, you will take this later because, yeah, I'm barely setting priorities on this range. So the exploration zone, it will still be its own. And as I progress, now it's time to be more accurate. And let me divide this. So at the end of the day, you will have a model of 10 different zones, even though you don't switch back from 4 to 10 in one go. You can skip. So, for instance, this is what I did. So I started with 3, then 4, and I went to 10, and from 10, I went to 30 already. It's been some years that I'm using 30 levels, 30 zones. And I don't think I will be using more of those. For me, it's more than enough. So that is the key of priority zones. It's something qualitative. So at the end of the day, what we're doing is that in this graph, hey, I'm distributing this, but it's not 25, 50, and 25. They will be of the same range. We have different ranges. So now if we see the vertical axis, hey, we will get what? Let me actually use SuperMemo for that, to be more precise. So the first cut will be 6.2, 25 exactly, and the 56. And the other one will be 100. So this is what we see more or less here. So you notice that, hey, the ranges are different. And this could be super interesting, as we will see in the mastery track, because you can automate this with auto-hotkey scripts. So instead of deciding precisely here, hey, I need a priority between 0 and 10, I'm too biased and so on, I will put a range and let the script decide for me arbitrarily. So it's slightly up, slightly lower, but within this range. And then you fine tune that, hey, now it's just 2%. And later on, at least in my model, the first 10 are within the first 1%. I'm very precise. So this is more or less what you need to know, and take your time. This takes time. This takes a long time to master. So there's no, it doesn't mean faster the better. Could be the case that some users, they use SuperMemo a lot, they import a lot, so their collection grows super fast, and they need priorities at a faster rate, because the consequences they will face are more short term. If you just spend 10 minutes a day using SuperMemo, you will need months and months to see the bad effects of not prioritizing, right? Just take your time. The analogy I have is like a scorpion or this kind of animals, that when they grow is, oh, my shell, it's too tight, it doesn't fit me anymore, so I will just get rid of it and get a new layer, and so on. So this is more or less that, hey, I'm losing, I need more precision now, I have more elements, or I need another decimal, I cannot do decimals. Time to update. Just follow your own judgment. And a reminder, in the mastery track, you will see those models that I have chosen. And using SuperMemo, prioritizing this, and so on, in case it's too abstract, I want to see this in reality. Once those are done, they will be in the description. So let's start let's start with the priority batch operations. There are 4. We'll start with increasing the priority, batch increase. So let's say that I have, I don't know, the SuperMemo course. Imagine I want to increase the priority of everything here. Okay. I will just select those. Do you see? I have low priority and very high, another one of low priority. So what I'm going to do is process the browser and priority. And among the 4 options, increase. Even though what I go is in the same dialog, so it doesn't matter which option I select, I go to the same place. I just have some options pre-selected. So if I click on, to make my point, if I click on decrease, I just check the box increase and it's in the same place. Okay. Then here there are some options. I can use the slider or the percentage, whatever is more convenient for me. I like the sorting criteria, that you only had the sliders and it is so painful to do. Awesome. What does that mean? Let's do 50. This is the default. That means that the priority will be multiplied by this. In our words, it's multiplying by half. So if I have 70, a half of 70 will be 35. This is so convenient because remember that the priority is the other way around. The higher the number, the lower the priority. To increase it is just using arithmetics. If you divide by 2, the priority is doubling the priority. Because the lower the number, the higher the priority. Okay. There are more stuff in the dialog, but just let's do this. I'll do just a screenshot of before, so we have the after as well. Okay, 15 conversions have been done. Do you see the difference? Let me move it. It's 35, as expected. But what happened with the other ones? Yeah, it was 0.005. Half of that would be 0.0025. But for me, this is not enough. I don't have enough positions in the queue. In order to have 4 decimals that this change, that means I need more than 100,000 elements in my ascending queue, in my element queue. That's why it didn't change. Actually, the other ones it did, 0.3, 0.6 is 0.3, but not the other ones, because if we check the actual position, it's the 3rd element, and the other one will be the 4th element. So if I increase the priority, yeah, at maximum, very maximum, it will get 1 position over on the priority queue, if this makes sense. But the others, they did a huge difference, like 20,000 places. So that is how it works. And remember that this is relative. So if I trigger this again, priority increase, and 50% again, now it's 35. So it will be 17 point something, right? And the last one will be 11. Exactly what I thought. So every time the increase is less and less, meaning that the higher the priority, starting with the priority, the narrower the margin of that increase. And the lower the priority, the starting priority is super low, the higher the range it can increase, if this makes sense. And everything stays the same. So what actually we did, so I will represent visually what we did. The topics were low priority in the 70s, and then there were more or less in the 35s. But the item was 20, was already lower, higher priority, sorry, lower number. So therefore, it just moved a little. This is not that accurate, that on the color, on purpose. Meaning that the lower the starting priority, the higher it can move. And if the starting priority now is here, there's no magic can move. Keep in mind this is not linear. So all of this, red and orange, it's 2% already. Then if we take into account that this is linear now, so the halfway is 50% is here, then half will be like this, 25%, right? But if I am very close to 100 and I increase the priority by half, I just do this jump, half of the queue already. So the closer I go, the less I can increase, right? That, yeah, it's subtle, some pixels I'm increasing and so on. That's actually what we're doing. The topics, those 3 topics, and the item. So you can neglect those of what I just did. Awesome. So I hope this is more clear. What you're actually doing is just moving things around by a multiplier. That's it. We are using the absolute priority in this case. We have seen already how to increase a priority in bulk, a batch operation. We will do the other way around. So I will visit the last browser, what I did, and I'm going to do the other way around. So I will try to compensate priority and decrease, and before I did 50%. Now I will do 150, which is the same, because multiplying by a half is dividing into 2. Here is decreasing. We want to push further, right? So it's 1 point something, and this something is what we're multiplying. If I want just 10% increase, I would say 110, which is by the way the minimum. At least the minimum you can do with the manually here. Oh, you can actually do here with the slider is too hard to be precise. You can get up to 10-fold. But this is usually absurd unless the priority is very high. For instance, I have 17. It's impossible to have an increase of 10. It will be 170%. It's already out. The maximum is 100, right? So remember this. 100 means no increase. 110 will mean 10% increase. And 150 will be 50% increase, which is what I will do to more or less counter what I just did before. Hey, not exactly. And that is how it's just arithmetics. It's just how mathematics works. I had 35, and then it was 17, because 17 is half of 35. But now I'm adding half of what I have now, not what I had before. So I'm adding half of 17. It's not what I wanted. By the way, there's no undo. So what I'm going to do is increase to more or less counter this again. Okay. It's not exactly the same, but it's close enough. So, hey, it's 13. So instead of 50%, I want double. So this will become 26. Now makes sense. So remember the mathematics. It's like saying, I don't know, a new product is 20% more expensive. Instead of $100, it's 120, 20% more expensive. Gotcha. But if you take the reference, the new price, hey, the new price is how much? Then if you have the new product 10% off, it's not 100. Because then the reference is 120. And the 20% of 120, it's 24. It's just arithmetics. I hope is enough. Awesome. So remember, you can do this multiple times in case you want it. But what happens now if we do tenfold? It cannot not go to 260. So what's going to happen? They are the last. So basically it's a sailing. If you put something above what will be 100%, it will be 100%. This is extremely, extremely dangerous, because unless you are decreasing very high priority ranges, that you could, let's say 0.01, that you could multiply by 100 even, and you will still have 1%. Let's actually do that. So in that case, I can afford decreasing the priority by tenfold, because if it's 0.009, it will be 0.09. And accordingly, do you see? Up to 3% the lowest, because it was 0.3%. That's the maximum by design that SuperMemo allows you. But if I do it again, still is meaningful. Gotcha. Let me do it again. Okay, that's a random selection I just did. Those are, do you see those are in the 54% and so on? So what I'm going to do, if now I do a priority decrease, 150 will put them on the 75-80%, and 200 they will become to the maximum already. So I don't even need tenfold here. So what's going to happen? Look at that. Now all of them are exactly on the same place, next to each other. Meaning, visually, what I just did is that I had topics. Imagine I have hundreds of that. Now I only have two, to simplify. So they were here. I moved them here. But I had hundreds of different tiny topics with a space in their position, and now they are dead on consecutive. If I go to SuperMemo, now I sort by priority. It's the exact same order. They are next to each other now. So I have lost all of the difference between them. Decreasing priorities is a lot more dangerous than increasing it, because you have this effect that everything will be in a bucket. And you may have seen from myself in the theoretical videos of this section that that's something you want to aim at. To be an expert in prioritization means to deprioritize, but that doesn't mean you will do this. Actually, I suggest virtually don't ever use the batch priority decrease, unless you do some outlier case that you merge a collection, like let's say I merge my English collection and I want to do something very drastic, and what I added, it's new. I haven't done those items myself, are pre-built. If there are not outlier cases like those, I suggest don't do this at all. It's very likely you do more damage than anything else. In the mastery track, we will see precisely use cases, perform it for real, and you will see more examples, not just the one I did. That is the most relevant one. So we have seen how to increase and decrease priorities in bulk. Now it's time to see the next one, the other options, which is a spread and adjust. And again, if I click on a spread, I go to the same place. It's the same dialog always. So that's the third option. And by the way, we haven't discussed the stuff here in the percentage, position, limit changes, and so on. Just wait for that. Okay. Then what is a spread? How should priorities be modified? The spread is ignore whatever there is. That's a very good example. Why? Because I have extremely high priorities and extremely low priorities. So instead of increasing or decreasing them and keeping the absolute difference, what I'm going to do is no. I start by the percentage 5 until 10. That means, in our words, that jump 205 elements each time. As spreading always have the same difference. So if I have, let's say, 1,000 positions in the queue, and I have 100 elements, every 10 positions in the queue, I will have an element. Okay. It's from this position to this other position, or I can say the percentage. I could say that, no, start from the position 2,000 to the 3,000, and that equals those percentage, up to 4 decimals. What could happen is that, let's do it. Do you see? From the minimum to the maximum I set, and they are always in the same distance to each other, equidistant. That is extremely problematic. They will have a lot of issues in the long term. Don't do this with your own staff. What you have processed on incremental routing, don't do that. Do it on the previous material. Let's say you import my collection or one of the SuperMemo collections. Yeah, okay. Because it's an outlier case that it's material you didn't create it yourself. But other than that, it's very likely you do more damage than anything good. So now you see that it's sorted. So it doesn't matter that some were very high priority and very low. This is, I'm neglecting whatever there is, and I will put always the same priority for each element according to the steps. Then I will do it once again, priority spread. And what I will do is, I will decide the step. Is no, I want every 1,000. That means that if I start from the 1%, I need 25 point something percent of my priority queue. Meaning that if I want to spread every 4,000, I need all of the queue. I can still do it. 4,064. But if I want 600, 6,000, it doesn't tell me. So I didn't type 4,064. What SuperMemo does is that whatever you type in, it just sets the maximum. That, hey, based on your range, that's the maximum stretch you can spread. If I now put the position here, that is my entire queue. From the first one to the very last, because I have 57,000 something elements, right? So I can do that. Do you see now they have different ranges? From the very first one to the very last, this is 100. It's the lowest and 0 is the highest, right? Just to make my point. That means, as you will see in the mastery, that I can ask for something that is mathematically impossible. That I want priorities from 1 to 5, and at the same time I want a step of 10,000. Nope, I only have 4,000. This is different, and that is different, by the way, of what we'll see next in adjust. Remember, here, if you exceed the limit, SuperMemo will always rewrite the maximum you can afford automatically. That's all you need to know for now about spreading priorities. So, and one final detail. It's a very important detail. We have said that just and spread, the only difference is a checkbox if it's checked or unchecked. Adjust is the last one when the box is checked. And you preserve that. You should choose that when the priority differences between the items and the topics make sense. You want to preserve that. And a spread when you want to get rid of that. But there's a big nuisance that the physical order you just created in the browser is what matters. Because you destroy the priorities. It will become sequential. But this sequence is imposed by the same order you see on the browser window. If I open this, and I sort, like this. So to make my point, okay, I imagine I want to modify the priorities of this subset. This comes from one specific book. It's the same source. Then, if I do now run the spread, it will have this order, this sequence. So this one, scientific research, structure, will be the first ones, and then with the same sequence, 515 to the bottom. But look at the priorities. They are not sorted, right? The order I have now is the default and is the order by the knowledge tree. So if I really want to keep the sequence, I first sort by priorities, look at that, super high priorities, and now I do trigger the spread. At least I have the same sequence. that it was the highest to the lowest, what I kill is the precise difference. It will be always the same step, which is very likely to happen in natural, organic, incremental reading. And I could do some random, here you go, or what I could do, random, look at the priorities. So if it's really from someone else that I really need randomness, because it will be someone else's importance, not mine, you could even have this flow, that you just do random, the order is completely arbitrary, and now you trigger the spread. This is one of the examples in SuperMemo that it is just 10 seconds to tell you, hey, the spread keeps the order in the element window. It's very quick to understand that, and this makes a huge difference. So people who are not aware of that will make always the tree order, with the huge consequences there will be. It's a very clear example that once you understand how SuperMemo works, especially with those features that is not that easy to double check, because there are too many items or elements that have been modified, and it will take a while for my outstanding queue every day to notice this change. And it doesn't take that much time, but the difference is huge. That's why I think some of these videos, especially in this section, for the Pleasurable course of SuperMemo, is a massive deal. I will save you a lot of time. Let's focus now on the fourth and last option in SuperMemo to modify priorities in bulk, the batch setting priorities. So let's say I will open this very same thing, priorities, right? Okay, I have this. Okay, so it's called adjust. It's the only option that has no logo, no icon. I don't know why. And if I go here, it's, hey, it says a spread. How come? How come I don't have a fourth option? We have done increase, decrease, and a spread. Where is adjust? That has no icon. Well, it's here. Basically, adjust is a spread with a checkbox of adjust in proportion. That's it. Now, this is a bad case because I already did the spread here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is just get some items. Here I did a random selection. Do you see that I have priorities of any range? Awesome. Then if I do spread, this will become the first, the 29 will become the last, and they will have always the same steps in positions in the priority queue. But if I do adjust in this case, and I say from as before 0 and 100, which is the entire queue, that means in a step of 2052 in this case. Could be the case that my collection is not large enough. So for instance, I'm saying, hey, just jump 100 positions. I can still do it because there are 29 elements to be reprioritized. But if I put a number lower than 29, like 20, it's mathematically impossible. I need less than one step. Now this is that obvious, but if you have large subsets of, let's say, 1,000, and hey, I want this to be between 9 and 10, could be that hey, it's not enough. To simplify, if you have 100 elements, each element represents 1% range. If you have 1,000, 0.1. If you have 10,000, 0.001, and so on. So when this happens, now let me be super precise. It will be grayed out. I cannot accept the OK. And the steps is 0 with exclamation marks. That is impossible, mathematically impossible. That is a difference with the spread, basically without adjusting proportion. Why? If you remember, spread just rewrote the number to the maximum it could afford. Here it doesn't. It just tells you, hey, it's impossible. It's a big difference. Okay, so now I will do percentage from 10 to 20. Let's just use easy numbers. And then look, hey, they are not ordered. So they have been reprioritized, but they keep the relative difference. So this one to this 17 and 18, or this 20, were the lower priorities before. The massive difference with the spread is that the spread is, no, I will get the order that is in the element browser, in the element window, and I don't care about the priority there is. With adjust is what the word says. You will adjust the priority accordingly. So now if I sort by priority, the order is different of the elements, right? This would have been the result if I did just spread that from the lowest to the latest. And one final detail, even if I set 10 to 20, you will see that it's not exactly like this. It's 9.996. That means, according to the elements I have in my collection, I cannot represent this number, because the next element in the priority queue will be 10.003, let's say. Let's say for 20. I exceeded because every element is 1 over 37,000 and something else that I have in my collection. Hope this makes sense. So if I had that on, let's say, 10,000, 20,000, or a multiple, then you can represent that number explicitly. Okay. Then, the question that now we have seen everything. Increase, decrease, spread, and adjust. Then the use cases when adjust is better than a spread, or just increase, and so on. We're going to see this in the mastery track. Here, I only wanted to let you know this exists. There will be a video, a theoretic video with the slides of why you shouldn't do that. And if you do, all of the big repercussions there are, especially for newbies. That's why I have taken this out completely, and it's in the mastery. Because I'm not going to give you that power that it will kill you. Because basically, it's like giving you the power to destroy your collection. So I want to re-emphasize, this exists, you will get there, just not today. Even myself, I have taken a lot of caution. I read everything in extreme detail in the documentation, and I have still messed up big time. So if you are looking for those, go to the mastery track of the course. For the use cases and so on, that we will have quite a lot of videos. And for the meantime, just get the next video, the wording of priority batch operations. So now we have seen how to prioritize elements and how to reprioritize in bulk. So now it's time for a massive wording with priority batch operations. We have seen how to modify priorities by elements, pretty easy, but also with batch operations. Increase, decrease, adjust, and spread. It's a big deal, not just for newbies. Even if you use SuperMemo for a few years, it's still too much power. It's very likely you messed up. Then, for the Fluency, we are only to cover this, what you will get, what you should avoid, and why you should wait for using this. That's why all the flows and use cases will be done and covered on the mastery track. Then there is a massive critical warning, because when you reset priorities of many elements at once, you cannot know the result after you have done it. It will take a while to see the difference you have done. And then, oh man, a lot of diverse elements in my priority queue, they were all over the place. Now they are massed together, next to each other. Oopsie doopsie, I didn't want to do that. Now it's too late to undo this. right? So you can do this with, you have temporary projects with deadlines such as exams, but those are outlier cases. So you have the nuclear option. It's the most powerful and potentially the most destructive tool in the prioritization arsenal. It's like saying, hey, there's a mosquito in the table, it's bothering me, so I will kill it. But instead of just using my hand or whatever, I just run over the tank, a military tank. Yes, you can do it. It's an absolute absurd overkill to do that, right? I have too much power. Same here with priorities. Then, so the intended consequence is a strategic neglect. You explicitly and intentionally starve other areas of your learning. Like I merged my English collection, I but set the priorities super low, so everything is very at the bottom, because yeah, everything can wait, because for me it's always secondary. First, I want incremental reading, and only then I will go to the language. And if I always neglect the language, no big deal. I just didn't have the time. As one example. There is no side effect. This is the entire point. So what you did, as a side effect, you're not going to see that. No. It's precisely what you did with adjusting the priorities. As long as you make this conscious decision, okay, it's fine. But what's going to happen is that most likely you're going to have effects you didn't want to. First, did this changed unwillingly, and second, it will take you a while to discover that change. It's a very bad situation. So how it works? By forcing hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, depending on your priority queue, you guarantee they will consume most of your time. You have the starvation effect. That then you only see, if it's high priority, you only see that, what you reset the priority. So the analogy is a dam, really. In a dam, you accumulate water and water and water, and then you intentionally flooding one valley, your project, with the water of knowledge, knowing full well that other valleys downstream will run dry for a while. I'm accumulating water and water, but then the river that comes next, it's taking a toll, and it won't dry out, but it will be very minimum. So everything else that depends, all of the hierarchy down of that river, will have a serious consequence. They will be stagnating. Same thing. If I put priorities too high, too much, that the priority, let's say, so it's less abstract, from here to here, it's just one concept group put together. I didn't know well enough the consequences of spread, let's say. Because if I just spread every 200 positions, like we did in the example before in the videos, okay. But if I spread every 5 positions or 2 positions, perhaps I didn't, just doing my point. So perhaps I don't decide this the step, but since I'm a newbie, I don't know what I'm doing, I decide, this is from 1 to 1 point, well, now I will force it very small, because the selection is small. I just take a look at the minimum and the maximum. I select OK. And that's it. I didn't notice that the step was 4. Imagine that a concept group that represents a quarter of my collection now has been spread every 4 positions. I messed up big time. And because they are priorities, are the positions in the priorities, that means that I'm not just affecting the ones in the subset that I just did. It's whatever was there has also moved, right? So imagine that I displace 1,000 positions. So what was in the position 3,500, now it's in the position 4,300. I have shifted 1,000 positions, right? It's massive. It's too disruptive. Then, what is the valid use case? A focus project. When you have the exam, you have a deadline, certification, something like that. That we will see the mastery course. It's the only exception that, okay, I know this is big time, I don't know, but it is what it is. the deadline is forcing me to go against the priorities and against a spaced repetition of some degree, because you have this very artificial need of a deadline. Awesome. Then what's the danger? The unintended amnesia. What's called the silent backlog. So you could have, I don't know, let's pretend I did psychology, a lot of psychology in my collection. But not because I have moved psychology, that, hey, now I had some issues with my health, I have read a ton of stuff, then I reprioritized a lot of stuff about health, and by moving health, so it's more visual, I will do it here. So I had psychology more or less here. And I had plenty of stuff. Remember, it's not one block. There will be some items here, high priority, more well distributed. But to simplify, it will be like this, right? But now I have health like this. I was exploring this. But now I got diagnosed with something serious. I had some new allergens, so now I have to restrict my diet. I have to avoid certain things, change my some other stuff at home and so on. It's big time. I have reading about this in many ways. So therefore, let me now increase the priority. Boom, here you go. Then because this is non-linear, this is now like this, because the high priority is more precise. Keep in mind the red and orange is just 2%. Okay. But no. It's even more to the point that now I'm pushing psychology. No, you know what? I am spreading this. So now let's put this in gray, more or less, to simplify. That I had some spread, so here and there will be something that is not health, but most of the content will be health. I'm spreading this so much that I'm pushing psychology out. It does make sense. Even if it's contiguous, before psychology was here. And health, remember, it will be all over the place. So I will have hundreds of super tiny rectangles. Imagine something like this. So I'm not going to do it because it will be too time consuming, but you get the point. But just because I increase the priority of everything in health is, I don't care what it is, I will just do a subset. So I will generally do this. So I have health. Let me see. Here you go. Whoopsie-doopsie. 2000. So I open that. Look at the priorities. Are all over the place. I don't care. I'll do a mass prioritization. I spread. And now this is very important. So it goes to 2 to 12%. It's every 2 steps. There will be one health, one whatever was already in the priority queue. So now that is a big time. This is a big issue because look now. They are consecutive. The other ones are dismissed. That's why they are consecutive in the range. Not the point of this video. But now if I go to my priority queue, I will have all of those elements and one in between them. So half of the content on this range will be just health. It's one of the consequences there are of using this. So now all of these all over the place that I had in this range, very high, kind of low, and so on, the gray, now it's here. Boom. First con. I lost all of the difference between them. Something was very high and very low that, hey, it's a concept. I care, health, but this particular fact is low priority. Like, this can wait. Or it's just something to verify or whatever, right? Not because it's a concept of very high priority means that all of the elements in the concept group will have to be very high priority. So I'm doing this bias already. Not only that, is that now they are consecutive in the queue. I won't be able to interleave now. And once my priority protection reaches this point, that starts with health, what's going to happen is that in the sorting criteria, I will need to add some fuzziness because most of what I will be getting is just health, 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 and health. It does make sense. Not only that, that the psychology that was high priority, like 15%, now has been pushed. And not only that, what I will be doing, since now on, since I'm a newbie and I don't understand priorities well enough, is I will do repetitions on health because this is what's going to be outstanding. So I'm going to do what? Extracts. And not just extracts, I will also do clauses. So I increase the number of elements, even though in some of them I will actually apply done. So some of them are actually processed and become folder because I applied done, but are still more than the ones I had before. And since I'm a victim because I'm not knowledgeable of this, is, hey brother, I have a lot of concepts and I'm always getting health. Incremental reading doesn't work. People believe that. No, it's because you're a victim of this. Don't do batch reprioritization until you fully get all of the pros, cons, especially long term. Because this keeps increasing and increasing because it's what it appears, right? Unless I do subsets of everything else and so on. And then psychology is pushed and pushed. And then, hey, my exams are for psychology. I do health on the side for my own benefit, right? So what happened that the psychology was here, super high priority, and now it's here. Even though I have never explicitly modified the priority of any element in psychology. It has been a consequence of the other way around, of reprioritizing health, super high priority that shift everything else. And since then I continue to do reps, I continue to generate new items, is being pushed and pushed and pushed. Because the new items and elements will have the range, will have the priority on the same range, because they inherit the priority. That's why first, setting your own priorities by zones will send health here and there. So remember that if I use this, I'm reading this, I do an extract, but hey, this extract will be general. It's not high interest. So I'm already moving things around. And if I still see it, the extracts will be in the same range zone of general, not as core anymore in this example. So incrementally, I am splitting this away once again, more or less than doing what I did with the spread, that everything was merged. Because the step was every 2 elements. Hope this makes sense. It's a big deal. That's why first, get through the entire course, finish it, then go to the mastery course. Perhaps you have used SuperMemo for a year. Then it's time. In the mastery track, we will see, oh shoot, now I did it, what can I do? If it's like this, that is, it's very put together, hey, have its own collection for your exams. It will be a lot easier to prioritize your collection. But if you mix your own stuff with deadline stuff, it will be very problematic. You need to be really well aware of how priority works in SuperMemo, or you will mess up your collection, guaranteed. I'm not going to extend more, but keep in mind there will be a lot of videos about that, many hours. But those hours in the videos, it will save you more time than being a victim long term of this, believe me. It's what they call priority clumping. It's not an official name, but it's very convenient to name it like this. Basically, for every operation that is changing priorities in bulk, it's very likely you will end up doing this, even if you don't want to. So we're going to see this, first define it more conveniently, and how you can avoid it, or at least how you can be aware of this. First, imagine a deck of cards where you add a new ace of spades, but all at once. So you have all of the normal deck, a poker deck, but you add 10 that are the same, ace of spades, right? Okay. When you sort the deck, all of those identical aces will be grouped together. is a priority clumping. So instead of being even every 3 cards or 4 cards, evenly distributed, they are all put together, one next to each other. They are consecutive in the queue. Okay. Then there are different ways to get there. So we have the inherited priority. When you create multiple items, like close relations, next to each other, we will see that later in the course, especially it's very high priority, every single element will have inherited the priority. So they will be very close to there. Could also be because you did a split from a topic or some other stuff. We are not going to now list every single scenario. Just to let you know that there are certain options, features, that will lead to this result directly. Not because you use the priority adjust or whatever, or increase, decrease, and so on. And also a thing is a break. That's an outlier case already. Is because some people take breaks that is like a few years and they come back to SuperMemo because they try it off and on, right? If it's 1 month, 3 weeks, it will be the same, just not as big. But a long break causes a natural spacing of items to expire. When I mean identically prioritized items, remember that no priority is the same. They will be just consecutive to each other. But it will be, I don't know, 1.005, 1.008. So they are very next to each other without being precisely the same. What happens is that all of those are now outstanding today, or due. And not just a few of them, a lot of them. Then causing them to appear one after another in your learning session. As long as your sorting criteria follows a lot the priority, now it's a problem. Because you will have a lot of siblings or similar cards next to each other. Because their priority was the same. Well, very close to each other, neighbors in the priority queue, but they had different intervals, right? So you were not seeing that every single day, or at least on the same day. But because you have done a break, now everything has been outstanding, for longer or shorter, but has been outstanding, and then you only do by priorities. So you are a victim once again of the priority clumping. It is more indirect, but it's the same thing. So let's go straight to the solution. I know there's a lot of text here. The solution will be to spread priorities. But keep in mind that the spreading priorities, it's limited because you cannot spread exponentially or asymptotically. You can only spread evenly, which is limited. So the goal is not to shuffle the entire deck. Remember the deck with the 10 aces of spades. But is to gently nudge the clumped items apart. Because if you shuffle the entire deck, it's absolute random. You will have arbitrariness. Yes, you get rid of the plumped items, but you pay too much of a cost. You don't want that. So what you can do? There is a non-destructive surgical fix, surgical like the precision of a surgeon. You isolate the problematic items. You can do that with the browser. It can be because they are from the same source, the same concept, group, or from a search, or whatever there is. You can congregate them. Awesome. Then you will apply a spread to those elements. Those are not necessarily items, could be also topics, by the way. Could be the case that we will see later on, that you can do a subset, what's called a registry subset. No worries, we'll see this in the mastery track in excruciating detail, performing all of this that we're saying. Now here, we're only saying what is the solution, without performing it. Then, you will just do a spread in the menu. Then, choose a range. Remember, we have seen that already. Has to be mathematically possible. What I suggest is to use the rule of thumb. Don't be too narrow, but not too open at the same time. Then sort and learn. You click, we have seen that already. You'll need to sort once again because a lot of items have shifted their priority on the same day. You don't want to wait for tomorrow. And that's pretty much it. So the solution for priority clumping is a spread, even though it's limited. And it's not a solution that is, it's a perfect can do. It's like kind of a solution, but it won't ever be a very good solution or an optimum solution. An optimal solution is to prevent the clumping. So best practices for future prevention. You should keep your learning queue, outstanding queue, healthy and avoid clumping in the future. Adopting what habits? Generate clauses moderately, incrementally, not all of them all together. If you split, what we'll see later on in this course, split with caution. There will be dedicated videos about the cons and the consequences of splitting and what they call the oversplitting, that you overuse that feature and it will backfire, not today, but in the future. And when you realize, oh shit, this is backfiring, you are late. You are not some days late. You are perhaps some months late already. And a spread after processing. Once you are completely finished with an article, immediately run a spread. Why? Because this ensures that new items are properly interleaved from the very beginning. Still is a half-baked solution, by the way. If you do proper incremental reading with incrementalism, you will rarely need that. So, you have correctly identified a sophisticated problem and rightly avoided the blunt instruments of randomize, auto-postpone, even worse, mercy, and so on. So by using spread priorities on targeted subsets, which we will cover subsets deeply in a dedicated section later on, then using spread priorities on targeted subsets of your collection is the precise surgical tool that you need to fix your queue. A very good, simple, and quick analogy is cooking. So imagine that instead of adding 10 cards of ace of spades or whatever, you put 10 cards of salt. Oh shoot, there's way too much salt now. I cannot undo that. Like in SuperMemo, you cannot undo that. You can always get more salt if you want. But once it's there, you cannot undo that. What can you do that? What can you do in cooking? Spreading that salt. So you take some of the soup or whatever you were cooking, and you mix it with something else. New water or whatever, so it gets more diluted and it's not as salty. Where you are spreading. But hey, that's not the best thing. The best thing you can do is to prevent the soup to become salty. If I don't have this problem, I don't need to rely on spread to begin with. This has been everything about the theoretical perspective about the priority clumping. We will see this in detail in the mastery track. So to expand the wording of batch priority operations, there's this checklist. It's like a pre-flight checklist if you were a pilot. Before you press the button and you change a lot of items priorities, ask those questions to yourself. Is my goal temporary or specific? Like, do I have an exam that day in particular? Am I consciously willing to forget things in other subjects to achieve that? Because that's the consequence you will have. Like the example I did with health in exchange of psychology. Do I have a specific date when I will end this state of emergency? Like in exam, that I have a start day and usually I have a finish date, right? I will be cramming for 2 months or whatever you may want to do. And lastly, do I have a plan to recover the starved subjects after my deadline passes? Because usually once your deadline passes, you stop. You no longer cram. You no longer do artificial stuff to satisfy the deadline. Therefore, if you cannot answer a clear yes, like no-brainer yes, to all of those questions, you should not do this operation. Is my goal temporary? Yes. Is casually willing to forget other stuff to achieve that? Yes. Do I need a specific date while I will end this state of emergency? Yeah. Do I have a plan to recover the subjects I will be neglecting for this deadline? Yes. Then proceed. If that's not the case, don't. You will do more harm, more damage than anything else. That's the pre-flight checklist before a priority batch operation. So we have seen the 4 options there are, the 4 operations for batch priority modifications. Increase, decrease, spread, and adjust. So what we're going to see now is just an overview, what they do, the effect they have in the existing priorities, and what is best for. That, hey, if I want this, what is best? To use increase or to use a spread, and so on. Very high level. So, we have seen that increase and decrease, what it does is to shift the priorities by a fixed amount. It's always the same. 10%, 50%, whatever. Spread distributes items, should I say elements. Whenever I say items, I really mean elements. It's just usually some features are usually done with items, but can be with anything. So spread, you can distribute elements evenly across a new priority range. First, the range is new and is not fixed. You don't multiply by anything. So you override the priorities. Whatever that is neglected. And they will have a different priority. And adjust rescales the existing priority range to a new one. But it keeps the relative difference between them. But it doesn't add a multiplier like that, because decrease and decrease is using an absolute reference, and adjust is getting a relative reference. Then what about the effect on existing priorities? Increase and decrease preserve the absolute priority at some point. This requires nuisance. Yes, theoretically, if you add 10%, everything shifts 10%. But this you can add tenfold. Meaning you can increase or decrease tenfold or 1000%. That means that if the priority is already greater than 10%, it will become dead last, meaning everything will go and be smashed at the bottom or at the start of the queue, depending if you are increasing or decreasing. Since the scope is too large, like tenfold, this won't be true anymore. You will preserve the order, so who is that last, the lowest priority, the second last, the third last, and so on. But the relative difference is smashed. They are now consecutive in the queue, next to each other. You have created a massive priority clumping. Then the spread destroys the original priorities and creates a new linear distribution. It's linear and even. There are pros and cons of that. And adjust preserves the priority proportionally, maintaining the internal structure. That, hey, it's not just that this is the last one and the second last one on the elements I'm modifying. Not necessarily are the two that last in the queue. But it's by how much? Oh, they are, I don't know, 5% away from each other. This will be preserved. If some other one is just 0.5, in the new reprioritization, you will see that hey, they are now higher priority or lower, whatever you wanted to adjust, but they keep this difference. So whatever had 5%, now it will be 3, the difference, and what had 0.5, it will be 0.3. So they still have this relative difference, even though the absolute priority has changed. And finally, what is best for? The best use case for each functionality. Increase and decrease. Applying global boost or reduction from a topic-based or changing external deadlines or goals. A quick nudge. if you really stretch it, could also be items, by the way. It's even worse. To do this in bulk with items, you will only do it if it's pre-done content. The items already exist. You haven't created that. Outside of this scope, it's absurd to play with items. It's way too much. You are doing too much harm to no benefit. If your goal will be deadlines, then you use subsets, so you completely neglect the outstanding status. That if it's outstanding or not, I don't care, I just cram. That is preferable. Then spread. Spread is best for processing a batch or brand new or unprioritized material. Material that I just neglected at the beginning, or that I didn't know how to judge the priority. I was a noob in that field. So I did some extracts and so on, but yeah, it's kind of arbitrary, okay? Or comes from a different collection, and I imported that collection. Then all of the priorities that come are quite arbitrary. So I will do a mass spread for that. And or another thing you can do, for instance, if you split, let's say a huge article like the incremental learning from SuperMemo, then you could do the spread. Then, finally, the adjust. So preserving the priorities, the difference. You move an entire well-structured topic or down into a priority ladder without losing the nuisance. So, hey, what I have about psychology, I want to preserve this. I will just move it at half of my collection because now I want to focus on health and whatever I need for my job or for my exams, but I want to keep everything I have manually prioritized. This can also be the case, especially if you have imported a collection or a branch, you transfer to a branch, not necessarily the entire collection, but this was well distributed, the priorities were well set. Then hey, I want to move that in this collection, let's say it's English. Okay, let me move it by the end or kind of the end of the queue, but I keep all of the relative differences. What is more useful to the least useful is the difference with a spread. A spread will be that, yeah, I just imported something, but it's unprocessed. It's not even mine, or it's mine, but it's arbitrary. I don't care about the priorities. This is the difference. So that's all you need to know for now. See you incrementally.